Bronn swore, for the 10th time that morning, that he was done with highborn fools and the dangerous plots they wove. He remembered the day he had allowed himself to be bought, and how many times after that he had ensured his pockets stayed lined with Lannister gold. And yet, here he stood, feeling the weight of a handsome crossbow slung across his back, trudging north under a dirty gray sky. A cold wind nipped at his cheeks like a pack of hungry dogs, and each step felt heavier, as if invisible hands were pulling him back to King's Landing. He'd left the capital at first light 2 days prior, after a clandestine meeting in the bowels of the Red Keep with the Queen herself. It had been an audience he hadn't particularly wanted, at least not after she had stiffed him on his promised castle once. But now, she had sweetened the pot with something else. A wagon of gold, more than enough to buy 10 times the land he'd once dreamed of, a small army of sellswords under his command if he wished it, and every pleasure a man could afford. All he needed to do was a simple job. "Your crossbow," Queen Cersei had said in a voice as cold as the wind that battered him now. "The same one my dear departed father used on tyrants and traitors. That device, I think, would suit my message perfectly?" She'd smiled, and it was a cruel smile. "Use it on my treacherous brothers. See them ended. Bring me proof." The memory of her voice hovered at the back of his mind. He hated that voice, arrogant, regal, and so damned sure he'd lap up her offer like a starving dog. She had threatened him, too, in her quiet, imperial manner. No one threatened Bronn in such a cool tone without paying for it, one way or another. But the gold, oh the gold. Now, the crossbow strap dug into his shoulder. He found himself wondering for the umpteenth time if there might be a simpler way. Maybe he could just vanish, pockets heavy, into some far corner of the world. Essos was large. The Summer Isles. Somewhere away from the war of queens and dragons and White Walkers. But the Queen had spies, and she had Qyburn's cunning. She had a knack for retribution that impressed even him. She'd find him eventually, or so she promised. And he believed her. He'd seen enough to know never to take her threats lightly. Bronn spat into the wind. He had no love for Tyrion, but he didn't hate him either. The imp had always paid, one way or another, or at least tried. And Jaime? Well, that was more complicated. They had fought side by side against dragons, and that counted for something. Sir Jaime Lannister might been a gilded fool, but he was still a warrior who'd risked his life in the same inferno. And maybe that was the closest thing to trust Bronn had ever allowed himself. The horizon stretched out in front of him, bleak, frozen, and desolate. Winter had tightened its grip over the 7 kingdoms, and the roads were emptier than he had ever known them to be. Bands of refugees fled south, while lords and their retinues marched north to fight an enemy few believed until they saw it. He'd caught glimpses of the undead, broken bodies shambling in the night, ice-blue eyes shining like the reflection of a moonlit lake. The rumors were all too real. The wall had fallen. Winter was here. And the dead walked. He pulled the fur cloak tighter around his shoulders and pressed on. The only real plan he had at the moment was to find the pair of Lannister brothers, flush them out of whatever fortress they'd retreated to, and see what his gut told him in that moment. Everything else. Cersei's gold, the promise of safe passage back south, could wait until he decided which side was truly the winning side. Night eventually crept up behind him. The cold grew sharper, slicing through his furs. He found a small barn at the edge of some abandoned farmland. There, amid the stench of rotting hay and the occasional squeak of rats, he built a small fire. Sparks danced upward into the darkness, and he leaned back against the rotted wooden wall, crossbow on his lap. Sleep came in short bursts of uneasy rest. His dreams were filled with flickering images. Cersei's face, twisted in a sneer, Tyrion's mocking grin, Jaime's quiet stare, the shrieks of dragons overhead, and always the sound of gold, jangling, a lure and a burden. When morning arrived, he set out again, heading deeper into the cold heart of the realm. He had heard the rumor that the main forces from Winterfell had marched north to meet the White Walkers. But how far north? Word traveled slowly, and half of what he heard was contradictory at best. Some said the dead had already been vanquished in a great battle. Others claimed the Night King's army was still on the march, unstoppable. Bronn had to find out for himself. There was no point in traveling all that way to kill 2 Lannisters just for the realm to get overrun by zombies. He trudged through snow that rose to his ankles, then his shins, cursing with each step. Finally, he spotted 2 men on the road, black shapes against a white horizon. They saw him too, and paused, uncertain. Bronn lifted an arm in greeting. He wasn't in the mood to kill anyone over a misunderstanding. At least, not unless they gave him good reason. One man, tall and wrapped in a tattered cloak, carried a spear. The other, shorter but thick-necked, held a woodcutter's axe. They watched Bronn's approach warily, shifting their weight from one foot to the other. "Good day," Bronn said, voice curt. He kept a careful distance, but let them see his free hand. "You heading south?" The tall one gave a careful nod. Nothing left up here but cold and death." "Then you haven't seen the Queen's army?" Bronn asked. The shorter man spat. "Queen's army is a pack of sellswords in gold armor. They marched north weeks ago, with the Lady of Winterfell's force. Now they say they're all somewhere near the neck, or up closer to the last hearth. Hard to say. I only know we're not sticking around to find out." Bronn glanced at the crossbow for a moment, though he didn't raise it. No sense stirring trouble. "Any word on Sir Jaime Lannister? Or Tyrion the Imp?" "No." The men exchanged a quick look. "Heard the dwarf was advising the Dragon Queen," the tall one said. "She and her armies are around Winterfell, or were. Could be they've moved if the rumors of battle are true." The mention of Daenerys Targaryen reminded Bronn of that fateful day on the Blackwater Rush. The swirling smoke, the deafening roar of dragonfire, and Jaime's mad gallop toward the dragon. That memory left a bitter taste in his mouth. He recalled the searing heat, the way the world had gone orange and black with flame and cinders. That had been the day he'd nearly died for a Lannister, again. "Any news of that battle?" Bronn asked. "They say the dead were pushed back," said the tall man with the spear, a tremor in his voice. "But hundreds of good men died, maybe thousands. No one is certain if the threat is gone for good. Some say the Night King was slain, others that he still roams. But I don't plan to stay and find out." It was enough information for Bronn, for now. He nodded curtly, tossed them each a copper penny for their troubles, then walked on. Their thanks drifted to him, half lost in the wind. As he continued, he couldn't help but think. If the dead had truly been defeated, if the realm was saved from that horror, then the war between Cersei and Daenerys Targaryen was about to ignite in full. And somewhere, at the heart of all that would be the 2 men he was supposed to kill. The question remained, was he truly going to do it? Or had the moment come to reconsider his fortunes in another way entirely? He pressed on for days, sleeping in burnt-out farmhouses or half-collapsed inns, picking up tidbits from refugees streaming south. Each conversation painted a different picture. Some said Winterfell had been lost before the living regrouped in a miraculous last stand. Others insisted that Daenerys dragons had melted entire armies of whites into piles of ash. Most agreed that Tyrion Lannister still lived, and so did Jaime, which meant his target remained in the world. Occasionally, he passed groups of ragged survivors traveling north, faces set in grim determination. They claimed they had families to find, or that they'd left precious heirlooms behind. Bronn shook his head, thinking them fools. The realm had bigger problems. Still, he kept going, cursing the day he'd accepted Cersei's crossbow, and cursing himself for being fool enough to trek into a war zone out of greed and stubborn pride. The road north narrowed, edged by gnarled trees heavy with frost. Even the sky seemed darker here, as though it had lost any memory of warmth. Then he reached a checkpoint, manned by tired soldiers in mismatched armor. A battered banner hung from a makeshift pole. It bore a 3-headed dragon in black and red, the Targaryen sigil. He froze at the sight. He had no doubt Daenerys Targaryen had men patrolling the routes. He wondered if Tyrion himself had set up these lines of defense. The soldiers stood in the road, warming themselves by a large fire pit dug near the remnants of an old watchtower. "Halt!" one called out as Bronn approached. "State your business." Bronn raised an eyebrow. "I'm just passing through." The soldier studied him. He was a lean fellow with a patchy beard, a dented helm perched on his brow. "What's your name? Where are you from?" "I'm Sir Bronn of the Blackwater," Bronn replied. Because there was no point lying. Even if these poor grunts didn't recognize him, half of the sellswords and knights in the Targaryen ranks might. Better to own the name before suspicion turned into steel at his throat. "I fought with Sir Jaime Lannister against the Night King's army." That wasn't strictly true. He hadn't been in the big fight up north, but he had fought the undead at the wagon train battle near the Reach, hadn't he? That had included some whites eventually, or so rumor had twisted it. It was all a blur at this point. The man with the patchy beard stared at him. Then another soldier, a younger lad, bright-eyed with a scratchy tuft of hair on his chin, spoke up. "Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, you're the one who shot the dragon, aren't you?" Bronn shrugged. "I shot at a dragon. Damn near took me and my friend for lunch." The younger lad grinned, evidently impressed despite himself. Then the older soldier folded his arms over his chest. "What brings you here?" Bronn paused. The truth was never wise to spill in its entirety, not to strangers. "I'm looking for Sir Jaime Lannister. I figure he might be near Winterfell, or on the field of battle. If he's fighting under the Targaryen banner, then perhaps we're on the same side again." "Nander." The older soldier looked him over, weighing the crossbow strapped across his back. "That's a fancy piece," he said. "Belonged to Tywin Lannister," Bronn replied with a thin smile. "The Queen in King's Landing asked me to return it to Jaime. Family heirloom and all that. You can imagine, they want their father's memory close in these trying times." A blatant lie, but smooth enough, he hoped. The soldier grunted. "We've orders from Lord Tyrion to let travelers pass if they pose no threat. If you're truly Sir Bronn, I expect Lord Tyrion might be keen to speak with you." "Manher." Bronn's heart gave a curious twist at that. How easy it would be to walk straight into Tyrion's camp and deliver that crossbow's bolt. But was that what he truly wanted anymore? That question he still couldn't answer. "I wouldn't mind a chat with the imp," Bronn said lightly. "He always did pay his debts." "Sometimes." The soldiers let him through, but kept their eyes on him as he walked on. The presence of the Targaryen banner flickered in the corner of his vision. The wind carried the faint smell of horse dung and unwashed bodies. There was a war camp somewhere ahead, or at least a gathering of forces. For a moment, Bronn wondered if Daenerys dragons were near. If so, would they remember him as the one who'd loosed that scorpion bolt? Probably not. He hoped not. Even if they did, maybe they'd appreciate that he was better at shooting Lannisters than dragons, at least some of them. He followed the road until the trees opened onto a wide clearing. A makeshift encampment sprawled across the snowy field. Dozens of tents, fires burning in trenches, horses whickering and stamping their hooves in the cold. The hum of conversation, the clang of hammer on steel, all the sounds of war preparing for another day. Bronn made his way toward what looked like the central part of the camp, where the grandest tents were pitched. Guards stood at intervals, but no one stopped him. A few gave him curious looks. A few recognized him with a quick nod. Word traveled fast. By the time he reached the largest pavilion, a small crowd had begun to gather, whispering that Bronn of the Blackwater had arrived unannounced, crossbow in hand. A familiar voice pierced the low chatter. "Well, well, well. There's a man I never thought I'd see at my own invitation." Bronn turned to see Tyrion Lannister standing beside a brazier, gloved hands outstretched toward the flames. There was new color in Tyrion's hair, more silver among the blonde. The lines on his face were deeper than Bronn remembered. The last time they'd been in the same vicinity was at King's Landing during that ill-fated meeting with Cersei to discuss the undead threat. "Tyrion," Bronn said, tipping his head in greeting. Tyrion's mismatched eyes flicked to the crossbow. A tiny smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. "Ah, my father's old toy. Somehow, it always finds its way into people's hands who have strong inclinations to murder someone." Bronn shrugged. Metal is metal. It kills just the same as a cheaper weapon. You're not wrong. Tyrion's breath formed a small cloud in the frigid air. Well, you've made it quite far north. What's your purpose? There were a dozen men and women within earshot. Guards, curious onlookers, perhaps a few lords or ladies. Bronn noticed how they looked from Tyrion to him, waiting to see if steel would be drawn. He decided to put them at ease, or at least amuse them. I came to see which side you're on, he said, and whether there's any chance you've got that promised payment lying around. You remember, your sister was promising me River Run at one point. Yet here I am, still castless, still goldless. Man? Tyrion chuckled, though the sound was short and somewhat joyless. My sister, as you might have surmised by now, rarely keeps her word. But I do keep mine, though it's a bit difficult in these times. The war's not won. I've run out of castles to bequeath until we have an actual realm left to rule. Bronn raised an eyebrow. Then you'd best get to winning, Lannister. A voice came from behind Tyrion, quiet and tinged with a certain sadness. And which side are you on, sellsword? Jaime Lannister stepped forward, dressed in layered leathers and a thick cloak lined with fur. His golden hand was visible, the metal reflecting the weak winter light. His expression was subdued, as if he carried guilt heavier than the snow itself. Bronn felt a flicker of relief to see the man alive. It meant he hadn't come all this way for nothing. You look well enough for a man who's faced the dead, Bronn greeted. Jaime inclined his head. Better than some. We lost a great many in the Battle of Winterfell, but we won as well. I heard rumors the dead might still be roaming. Tyrion answered, a few scattered wights perhaps, but the Night King is defeated. Arya Stark killed him. A deed that will be sung about for centuries. Now we face the living again, and that might be a darker proposition. Bronn nodded, absorbing that piece of information. The Stark girl had saved the realm by slaying the Night King. He shouldn't have been surprised. The Starks were a stubborn lot. He remembered meeting Arya Stark once, briefly, though she'd been only a slip of a girl. She must have grown into something formidable. So, the big fight's over then. You're free to turn your eyes to the south. Tyrion's mouth set in a thin line. We must. My dear sister has refused to send any reinforcements. She's holed up in the capital, likely hiring more mercenaries. She'll want to keep the throne by any means necessary. Our queen, he nodded toward the Targaryen banners, has stated her intention to march on King's Landing to end Cersei's reign. And I fear, for many, it may be another bloodbath. Then Bronn took in the hushed tension, the glint of steel, the flicker of uncertain flame in the brazier. What about you? He asked, glancing from Tyrion to Jaime. Will you help your sister, or the Dragon Queen? Jaime grimaced. We've already pledged ourselves to Daenerys Targaryen. We fought alongside her against the dead. Right, Bronn said, letting that settle in his mind. Cersei's betrayal still rankled him. He never believed she'd truly sent her forces north. But now the lines were drawn with clarity. Cersei versus Daenerys, the Golden Company in the mix, and these two Lannisters on the Targaryen side. Tyrion tapped his gloved fingers against the brazier's rim. And you, Bronn, it's odd you'd wander north in such a hurry just to find us, especially with that crossbow. Do I want to guess how you came by it again? A prickle of awareness ran through Bronn. He could lie. He was good at lying. But looking at Tyrion and Jaime, men had fought beside, drunk with, nearly died with, he realized there was a part of him that didn't want to spin a web of deceit. The question was, would telling them the truth earn him a crossbow bolt in the back later? Possibly. But if he was going to switch sides once more, might as well be honest. Or honest enough. Your sister, he began, his voice low so it wouldn't carry. She found me at the Red Keep after your parley ended. Promised me a wagon of gold if I put a bolt through you two. That's all there is to it. Now. A hush fell around them, though it was an odd hush in the midst of the bustling camp. The watchers drew in closer, uncertain. Jaime's jaw tightened. Tyrion said nothing, but something in his eyes flickered, as though the final piece of a puzzle slid into place. Did you come to do it? Jaime asked. To kill us? Bronn gave a half laugh. If I had, you'd be dead already. You know me well enough, Lannister. I don't waste time. But I've had time to think. Cersei promised me gold. Daenerys might promise me a flaming pyre if I betray her. It's not exactly an easy choice. Then? Tyrion folded his arms. We can offer you something Cersei cannot. Gold? Because I like gold. Tyrion shook his head. For all her wealth, she can't offer you your life if she loses. She's outnumbered, Bronn, outmatched by dragons and alliances. Yes, she's cunning, but the moment the armies of the north, the Vale, the Stormlands that side with Daenerys, and the remnants of Highgarden gather at her gates, King's Landing will become a slaughterhouse. She might burn the city to the ground in a final act of defiance. You want to be on the receiving end of that? Oh. Bronn considered it. It was true enough. I prefer not to be anywhere near that, but I also don't fancy ending up on the bad side of a victorious queen with dragons. She's merciful enough to those who bend the knee, Tyrion said quietly but firmly. And if you stand with us, I promise, yes, promise, that your loyalty will be rewarded. I can't name you a castle right now, but I'll see to it you're not shortchanged when this is done. Or if all you want is to vanish with a hefty purse, I can arrange that too. Then? The wind rustled the tents, and Bronn felt the weight of every gaze upon him. He slowly unslung the crossbow and held it in front of him. Jaime tensed, his good hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Tyrion flinched slightly. But Bronn just turned the crossbow around and offered it, stock first, to Tyrion. Then, take it. I'm not in the habit of shooting those who pay me well and timely. Cersei's gold means nothing if she's a corpse by the end of all this. Damn. For a moment, Tyrion hesitated, then reached out and took the crossbow from Bronn. You're handing over a lot of gold right now, Tyrion said quietly. I'm choosing the side that wins, Bronn replied. Or at least the side less likely to see me hanged once the dust settles. Jaime let out a breath he'd been holding. You won't regret it. Bronn offered a crooked smile. I regret most things, to be honest, but I'm all out of better options. Tyrion handed the crossbow to a guard. Keep this safe. We may have need of it for more symbolic purposes. Now, Bronn, walk with me. We'll find somewhere warmer, perhaps share some wine. There's much to discuss. Enter. They retreated to the large pavilion tent that served as Tyrion's command post. The interior was only marginally warmer, but at least there was a brazier and some furs laid across the ground. A rough-hewn table stood in the center, littered with maps, quills, and half-burned candles. Jaime lingered near the entrance, while Tyrion dug through a crate until he produced a small flagon of Dornish red wine. Not the best vintage, Tyrion apologized, pouring them each a cup. But it helps chase the chill away. Bronn took his cup and sipped. The wine was indeed mediocre, yet better than nothing. He let the warmth trickle down his throat. So, he said after a moment of silence, I'm guessing you're planning to march south soon. Tyrion nodded. The armies are reorganizing. We lost many men in the Great War against the Night King, but so did the North, the Vale, and the Targaryen forces. We must still combine what remains, muster from loyal lords, and ride south before Cersei can strengthen her position further. She has the Golden Company, courtesy of the Iron Bank's loan. She may try to fortify King's Landing beyond recognition. The cost in lives will be steep if we launch a direct assault. Entowin. We're hoping to avoid a massacre, Jaime said, stepping forward. The people of King's Landing have suffered enough. They shouldn't be punished for Cersei's vanity. But persuading Daenerys to lay siege instead of burning the city might not be easy. She's lost much in this war, including one of her dragons. Her patience for mercy is wearing thin. Meow? Bronn's memory flashed to that day on the battlefield, when the screams of men had mixed with the roar of dragonflame. Does she still have 2 dragons? I heard rumors of whites or something else. She has 2, Tyrion confirmed. One was turned, but it was destroyed in the final battle. So she has Drogon and Rhaegal left. Enough to turn entire armies to ash, if she so desires. Jon Snow, pardon, Aegon Targaryen, counsels her. But tensions simmer. People fear what Daenerys might do if she believes she must claim the throne at any cost. Now, Bronn gave a grunt. Then you best hope you can talk sense into her, else King's Landing is going to be a fiery grave. That's where we come in, Tyrion said, gesturing to the maps. I'm trying to devise a plan that forces Cersei's hand without forcing Daenerys to burn the city. Some cunning infiltration, perhaps, or a covert strike at the heart of her power. Take out Cersei, break the Golden Company's contract, or something along those lines. Yet all my attempts come up short. Now, Jaime's expression was grim. Cersei has Qyburn. That man is as cunning as he is dangerous. She also has scorpions mounted on the walls, giant crossbows that can bring down dragons if they're lucky enough to strike a killing blow. The city is ringed with them, so an aerial assault is risky. Bronn's gaze flicked around the maps, the scattered notes. A large parchment displayed King's Landing's walls, fortifications, and the Red Keep. How many men do you have? He asked. Tyrion sighed. Half of what we had before the undead. Perhaps less. The north is exhausted, the Vale battered. The Riverlands might answer the call, but with the Lannister armies at half strength, and the Tyrell forces essentially gone, we have only the remnants of the Targaryen host, the Dothraki, and some unsullied, plus a few other banners that remain loyal. We still outnumber Cersei, but not by as much as we'd like. And we can't simply starve the city out. Hundreds of thousands would die. Then? Bronn traced a finger along the roads leading to the capital. You might not want mass slaughter, but I bet the people inside those walls don't share your fine sentiments. Fear makes them dangerous too. They'll fight if they think you're out to kill them all. The City Watch might be loyal to her if they believe it's their only hope. Jaime's eyes flicked to Tyrion. You'd best share with him what we discussed earlier, about approaching the Golden Company. Tyrion nodded, leaning over the table. I've tried to contact the Golden Company's commander, Harry Strickland. The Golden Company historically has Targaryen ties, ironically enough, from their inception. Though they're sellswords, I hope they might be convinced to break their contract if they see no profit in a losing cause. That's been our best gamble. But Cersei must be paying them handsomely, or they believe she'll hold out. So far, no luck. Then they're windy. Bronn let out a dry chuckle. Sellswords can be a fickle bunch. Precisely, Tyrion said. If we could persuade them that Cersei cannot win, and that they stand to gain from switching sides, then the city would be more likely to surrender without a bloodbath. Even if we can't do that, we might find another route. Jaime's posture stiffened as he glanced away, the old shame crossing his face. We have to try. We can't let the city burn, not again. Bronn remembered stories of the Mad King's final days. How Jaime had earned the moniker, Kingslayer, for killing Aerys before he could burn King's Landing with wildfire. He nodded in understanding. So you plan to slip a dagger into Cersei's back, or force her to surrender, or hope the sellswords turn? Tyrion glanced at his brother. I'd prefer something more diplomatic if possible, but with Cersei, such things rarely are. Bronn took a moment to consider. He wasn't a strategist in the grand sense, but he had a knack for survival and reading people's weaknesses. Cersei's biggest fear is losing that child she's carrying, or so rumor says. If she's still pregnant, she might cling to that as a reason to fight to the end. If you want her to surrender, you need to show her there's no hope of victory, but also that her child will be safe if she yields. Damn. Jaime's gaze dropped to the floor. Tyrion pressed his lips together. That's a thought, Tyrion said. But convincing her that Daenerys will show mercy, that's a tall order. Bronn shrugged. Maybe not, if you speak to the right people, or if you have the right leverage. It hung in the air, a weight of uncertainty. After a moment, Tyrion retrieved more wine. For now, let's keep you close. If you're truly allied with us now, help me with negotiations, or infiltration, or whatever else might arise. You've a knack for slipping in and out of trouble, Bronn. We could use that. And the pay? Bronn asked pointedly. Tyrion smiled wearily. You'll get your pay, one way or another. If I have to personally drag a chest of gold across the narrow sea, to find you a nice retirement. But ideally, It'll be an official gift from the crown once Daenerys ascends the throne. Bronn considered it, then nodded. All right. I'm in. But if it looks like everything's going to shit, I'm not above running. Then so. Jaime almost smiled at that. Understood. Let's hope we can avoid that outcome. They passed the next several days in that war camp, making preparations to march south. Bronn witnessed the patchwork of the Allied forces, a mix of northern bannermen in thick furs, unsullied in disciplined rows, Dothraki riders with curved arcs, men of the Vale in sky-blue cloaks, and a scattering of Riverland knights. It was an odd sight, all these disparate groups working in uneasy alliance. Everywhere Bronn went, he heard talk of dragons, the Targaryen queen's wrath, the cunning of the imp, or the Kingslayer's redemption arc. Whispers about Jon Snow's true parentage flitted about, though most common soldiers dismissed it as a rumor. One evening, Jaime approached Bronn at the edge of camp, where Bronn was practicing with a small throwing dagger, flipping it end over end into a chunk of wood. Jaime watched in silence for a moment. "You've changed," Jaime finally remarked, his tone thoughtful. Bronn snorted, retrieving the dagger. "I might say the same about you, golden boy. Lost your hand, lost your illusions, turned on your sister, and now you're a changed man." "Thou." Jaime gave a wry tilt of his head. "Fair enough. War and regret. They do that to a person." He paused, eyes drifting to the horizon. "When all this is done, if we survive, what will you do?" Bronn tested the dagger's balance, shrugged. "I'll find a place in the sun, with enough gold to keep me happy. Some women who won't rob me blind, and a comfortable bed. I'm a simple man." Jaime watched him carefully. "And if you could have a castle? A real one, not just empty promises." Bronn smirked. "I'm not cut out to be a proper lord, Jaime. A castle needs a man who wants to settle down, keep it in good repair, deal with peasant complaints, handle taxes. I just want the gold to hire someone else to do that boring nonsense for me." Jaime chuckled. "I'll remind Tyrion of that. Perhaps we can give you a keep with a steward who can handle the daily tedium. That would be a sight. I wouldn't mind it, as long as the steward keeps me well stocked with whores and wine." They shared a quiet moment of camaraderie, an echo of simpler times in the midst of something far larger. Eventually, Jaime exhaled and looked around. "You did the right thing, you know, turning that crossbow over. Tyrion and I were—" He hesitated, searching for words. "We never did right by you, not truly. Paid you well, sure, but never gave you the security you wanted." Bronn shrugged. "That's the way of things." "I mean it," Jaime insisted. "If we get through this, I'll see you rewarded. I owe you my life more than once over." Bronn slipped the dagger back into his belt. "You've got enough regrets as it is, Lannister. I won't become another one of them. Just remember, I'm a sellsword, but I'm not heartless. If I were, I'd have put a bolt in you in that tavern weeks ago." "No." Jaime nodded, a shadow passing over his face at the memory of how close they'd come. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't mention it," Bronn muttered, and that was that. Soon after, Daenerys Targaryen arrived with a small retinue. The camp stirred like a kicked anthill, men snapping to attention, the Dothraki chanting, the Unsullied forming ranks. Bronn glimpsed her from a distance, silver gold hair braided intricately, a regal bearing that belied her short stature, eyes that flicked across the camp with something between pride and grief. 2 dragons circled overhead, their shadows rippling across the snow. Bronn felt that old flicker of fear. He recalled the scorpion, how it had trembled in his hands as he tried to line up a shot at Drogon. Those creatures were nightmares incarnate. He stayed out of Daenerys's way, content to let Tyrion and Jaime handle the diplomacy. Eventually, though, a messenger summoned him to a meeting of war councils. He arrived to find a gathering of the realm's key players, Daenerys at the head of a large table, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen. Beside her, looking uncomfortable in the presence of so many lords, Sansa Stark stood with arms crossed, regal in a heavy cloak, her auburn hair pinned back. Arya Stark lurked near the shadows, quiet, watchful. Grey Worm, the unsullied commander, kept a stoic silence. Varys the spider folded his hands in front of him, face unreadable. Davos Seaworth waited near the periphery, as did Brienne of Tarth, who gave Jaime a nod of acknowledgement. Tyrion stood to one side, carefully observing. Bronn felt the tension immediately. This was not a room of comfortable allies, but rather a collection of uneasy partners, bound by necessity and overshadowed by mistrust. Daenerys lifted her head, gaze falling on Bronn. She studied him with that unwavering intensity. "Sir Bronn of the Blackwater," she said, her voice laced with measured control. "I recall you took aim at my dragon." Bronn dipped his head. "I did, your grace. In defense of my own life, and that of my liege at the time." "Now?" She arched an eyebrow. "And now? I have changed my liege, apparently. War does that, I find." A faint smirk played at Daenerys' lips, though it was gone in a blink. "So, I should simply trust you because you say so?" Bronn glanced at Tyrion, who gave him the slightest nod. "I handed over the crossbow meant for your hand, and your knight here, Sir Jaime. I could have shot them both. I didn't. I've decided your cause is the winning side." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face at the mention of winning side, but she nodded. "Very well. We'll see if you can help us in this next phase of the war. Tyrion believes you might be useful as a go-between with the Golden Company." Bronn's brow furrowed. "Go-between?" Tyrion stepped forward. "You're a known sellsword, with a certain reputation, and likely fewer scruples than the rest of us. I suspect you can speak their language. If we send an official envoy, Cersei would hear of it immediately, and it would compromise the mission. But you might slip into King's Landing more easily, make contact with them quietly, and see if they can be persuaded to switch sides." "Now," Jon Snow spoke up, voice calm but firm. "This could avert a massacre. If we can get the Golden Company to stand down, many lives will be saved." Bronn eyed them all. "That's a tall order, given that they're being paid by the Queen in the capital. They'll be suspicious of any attempt to buy them off. And if I get caught, Qyburn will have my head on a spike before sundown." Daenerys considered that. "If you succeed, you will be greatly rewarded. Not just by Tyrion, but by me. As Queen, I can name you Lord of your own seat, or shower you with gold, if that is what you desire." "Bow." Bronn's lips curled into a small smile. "I like the sound of that, your grace. But I'd need gold up front. Enough to make a respectable offer. The Golden Company won't take me seriously unless I've a chest of coin to show them." Tyrion pinched the bridge of his nose. Transporting a large chest of gold to King's Landing without drawing attention might be tricky. Varys spoke up, voice soft and measured. "There are ways to move valuables discreetly, especially if one has connections. I can arrange for a portion of gold to be smuggled in. Enough to secure a meeting at least. They'll want to see more eventually, but we can cross that bridge if they indicate genuine interest." Daenerys' expression sharpened. "We have precious little coin left. Our war chest is not infinite. But if this prevents the destruction of King's Landing, it's a price worth paying." Sansa Stark, who had remained silent so far, finally spoke, her voice precise. "And what if this fails? Then we'll have wasted valuable resources we could have used to feed our men, or aid the wounded." "No." Arya's cold eyes flicked to Bronn. "Yes. What if he simply disappears with the gold, or betrays us for a better offer?" Bronn shrugged. "Valid concern. But I like to think I'm a man of my word, when the reward is good enough. And if this fails, well, you'll still march on the city, and I'll have nowhere to run, will I?" Arya's gaze did not soften. Bronn got the sense she was not one to be charmed. Daenerys, however, appeared to weigh the possibilities. Finally, she dipped her head in assent. "We will try. But if you betray us, I will feed you to my dragons myself." Bronn believed her, wholeheartedly. He bowed slightly, hand over heart. "Understood, your grace." And so the plan was set in motion. Over the next week, Varys orchestrated the subtle movement of 2 small chests of gold. Tyrion supplied forged documents indicating a potential private buyer in King's Landing for precious metals, an elaborate ruse meant to disguise the real purpose. Bronn memorized the names of key officers within the Golden Company. Harry Strickland was the captain general, but Bronn intended to sniff out lieutenants who might be more easily swayed by personal profit. In large armies, the chain of command often had plenty of links susceptible to coin. He would travel in the guise of a merchant's guard, accompanied by a pair of trusted men from various networks. They would slip through lesser-known roads, avoid the main gates if possible, and make contact with an agent inside the city who owed the Spider a favor. From there, a meeting with some portion of the Golden Company's leadership would be arranged. It was a mad, risky scheme, but if it worked, it might spare countless lives. Or so Bronn tried to tell himself as he prepared. The day before departure, Tyrion summoned Bronn one last time. They met in Tyrion's tent, away from prying ears. Tyrion handed Bronn a small sealed letter. "Give this to the Golden Company's officers if they doubt you," Tyrion said. "It spells out terms, land in Westeros, a portion of the royal treasury once Daenerys is enthroned, and official pardons for all their men." Bronn raised an eyebrow, slipping the letter into his pouch. "That's quite the promise. Are you sure you can deliver all that?" "Men so." Tyrion gave a half-smile. "If we win, and if Daenerys agrees, which I believe she will, if it saves the city. She values loyalty, and the Golden Company switching sides at a critical moment would be precisely that." Bronn nodded, thinking of the possibility that Daenerys might renege. But he supposed Tyrion was as good a bet as any. "All right. Anything else I should know?" Tyrion hesitated. "Yes. My sister is dangerous. She might sense your presence the moment you enter the city. If you get caught, well, I doubt we'll be able to rescue you." "No." Bronn offered a wry grin. "Wouldn't expect you to, but I'll keep my head down. I've snuck in and out of that city enough times to know a few back alleys." Tyrion extended his hand. Bronn looked at it, then clasped it briefly. "For what it's worth," Tyrion said, "I'm grateful you chose not to kill me or Jaime. We need all the help we can get to end this war before it becomes another atrocity." Bronn stepped back, hands settling on his belt. "Don't get all sentimental on me, Lannister. I'm doing this for gold and survival." "Damn thee." A faint warmth touched Tyrion's eyes. "Of course. Farewell, Bronn." At dawn, Bronn and his two companions mounted their horses, small wagons in tow. They slipped out of the camp under the half-light of sunrise. The air was bitterly cold, but snow had begun to recede a bit as spring nudged at winter's edges. The going was slow, the roads still rutted with ice. But soon, they found the King's Road and turned south. As they traveled, Bronn occasionally wondered if a simpler path existed. Just run. Abandon this mission. Vanish in the chaos. But he suspected that no matter where he fled, someone would eventually track him. Maybe it would be the Spider's little birds, or Cersei's cutthroats, or Daenerys' men. He'd made a choice, and now he'd see it through. Besides, if the mission succeeded, he'd have gold aplenty, and a real chance at that secure life he'd always craved. They reached the outskirts of King's Landing after many days of travel, encountering surprisingly few road patrols. Most of Cersei's efforts seemed focused on fortifying the city, not patrolling the roads, likely because she expected a siege or a direct assault from Daenerys' forces. The city walls loomed in the distance, the familiar silhouette that Bronn remembered well. Parts of it reminded him of the Blackwater Bay, the fierce battle he'd once fought in the service of Tyrion. The place was steeped in too many memories. They approached a lesser-used gate near the mud gate. The stench of the Blackwater rush mingled with the brine of the sea. Seagulls circled overhead, cawing loudly, as if to warn the city of their arrival. The gate was guarded by half a dozen gold cloaks. One of Varys's men, who wore the attire of a merchant, offered the guards a convincing story about bringing in a shipment of valuables for wealthy buyers in Flea Bottom, who catered to higher-class taste, contraband smuggled from Dorne, or so the story went. A small bribe changed hands, and the guards waved them through without much fuss. Cersei must have needed coin as well, and perhaps contraband taxes were a welcome revenue stream. Inside King's Landing, life went on in grim desperation. The sky was overcast, the streets muddy. People bustled about, though there was an undercurrent of tension. Cersei's face was plastered on notices, proclaiming her the rightful queen, condemning the so-called usurper Daenerys Targaryen. Soldiers of the Golden Company patrolled in polished armor, their elephant sigil on display. There were fewer Lannister men visible. Perhaps her personal guard was concentrated around the Red Keep. Following Varys's instructions, Bronn left the wagons at a discreet warehouse near the docks. There, he met a thin man with nervous eyes and a scar across his chin. One of the Spider's informants, apparently. The man ushered them inside, then pointed to a stack of crates at the back, behind which lay a hidden alcove. Within sat two large chests, presumably containing the gold. "You will find everything you need," the man said, voice shaking slightly. "I'll set up a meeting if I can, but it may take time. The Golden Company is cautious." Bronn nodded. "Do what you must. We'll stay low." And so the waiting began. They found a cramped room on the second floor of the warehouse to sleep in shifts. They took turns skulking through the city, gleaning rumors. Cersei was pregnant, obviously so now, though no one seemed to dare comment on it openly for fear of retribution. Qyburn was rumored to have new monstrous weapons scattered along the battlements. The people whispered that foreign invaders were coming with 2 dragons, intent on burning King's Landing to the ground. Some claimed Euron Greyjoy still prowled the seas with his iron fleet, ready to strike at Daenerys' ships. 3 days passed before the contact returned with word. An officer of the Golden Company, one Sir Miles Yu, had expressed a guarded willingness to meet discreetly. Bronn had never heard of the man, but apparently he was a knight from the Stormlands who had joined the Golden Company years ago. Perhaps he missed his homeland. Perhaps gold was all he cared for. Either way, it was a start. They arranged the meeting in a dilapidated wine cellar near the Street of Silk, well after sunset. Bronn arrived with only one companion, leaving the other behind to guard the gold. Torches guttered on the damp stone walls. The air smelled of mildew and stale wine. Rat droppings littered the floor. Hardly a place for a comfortable chat. But that was the point. Secrecy. Sir Miles Yu entered with 2 escorts. He was of middling height, face scarred from old campaigns, hair cut short. He wore light armor bearing the Golden Company's sigil. His eyes flicked around, sweeping the cellar, noting the single entrance. Then his attention settled on Bronn. "You're the one who asked to meet," Sir Miles said, voice low. Bronn inclined his head. "Name's Bronn. I'm here to talk about the future. Yours, mine, and everyone's, if you catch my meaning." "None." Sir Miles' lip curled. "You're that sellsword who nearly killed a dragon, they say." "That's me." Bronn slipped his hands into his belt, keeping them near his daggers without being overtly threatening. "And you're a sellsword yourself, so I'm told." "Good. Means we speak the same language. Coin." Sir Miles exchanged a glance with his men. "Go on." Bronn gestured. "It's no secret. The Targaryen armies are on their way. They have dragons. They have the North, the Vale, some parts of the Reach, the Riverlands. They mean to take King's Landing, and they mean to end your contract with Cersei. Blood will flow if you fight, but it doesn't have to. There's a rich alternative if you'll stand aside. Or better yet, turn your cloaks at the right moment. No need for an open betrayal if that's too risky. Just pick your moment to put down your arms, or turn them on the Lannister loyalists. The choice is yours." "Men." Sir Miles listened without giving much away. "You talk as though you can speak for the Targaryen queen." Bronn shrugged. "Not exactly, but I've a letter from the hand of the queen. Spells out terms." He fished out Tyrion's letter, passing it forward. One of Miles' escorts took it, flicked open the seal, and skimmed it. After a tense minute, Sir Miles took the parchment himself, scanning it. His eyes lingered on phrases like land holdings in Westeros, full pardons, gold incentives for officers. Eventually he lowered the letter. "Even if we were to consider this, Harry Strickland is no fool. Nor is he a man easily convinced. It will take more than words on a page to sway him. He was promised a great deal by Cersei." "Bambi." Bronn let out a low chuckle. "Cersei's not exactly known for keeping her word. And if the Targaryens break through, do you honestly think she'll be able to pay you once she's dethroned? You'd be lucky to leave the city alive. You know the stories of Dragonfire, don't you?" Sir Miles' jaw clenched. "We have scorpions. The city is well defended. Bronn gave a lazy shrug. Perhaps. But Daenerys Targaryen has 2 dragons, the largest armies in Westeros, and a reason to see the city burn if she must. The Golden Company prides itself on never breaking a contract, I know. But you also pride yourselves on returning home one day. How do you expect to do that if you're all ash? Ben? Silence stretched. One of Miles' men shifted his weight. Another looked uncertain. Sir Miles studied the letter again. Then he said, "We would require gold, as proof. Enough to show the men this is real." Bronn nodded. "We've got gold. Not as much as you'd get from a full contract, but enough to prove the Targaryens can pay. Show your Captain General that letter. Show him the coin. See what he says. You can keep it quiet or gather a few key officers to tip the scales. That's your business." "Nine." Sir Miles tapped a finger on the parchment. "I'll need time, and there's risk. If Queen Cersei hears even a whisper, then you'd better be discreet," Bronn cut in. "Look, I'm a sellsword, same as you. I know how these things go. You stand with the losing side, you die poor and nameless. You stand with the winning side, you might get something out of it. And yes, the Targaryens will reward the Golden Company for helping them retake the throne. That's not just a guess, that's a fact. If Cersei wins, well, you'll have your coin. But what's left of the realm? She might burn half the continent in the process. Doesn't make for a stable future." "Nan?" Sir Miles considered that, face hard. "Give me until tomorrow night. I'll see what can be arranged. But no promises." "That's good enough for now." Bronn jerked his chin to the small door. "We'll be waiting. If you bring more men than promised, we'll vanish like smoke." Miles gave a curt nod, then motioned to his guards. They left through the gloom of the cellar, footsteps echoing. Bronn let out a slow breath. His companion, a silent fellow from Varys Network, looked relieved. "It begins," he whispered. "Aye," Bronn muttered, feeling the familiar churn of tension in his gut. There was still so much that could go wrong. If Miles turned them over to Cersei, they'd be hunted down within hours. But if it worked, they might just crack the Golden Company from within. And that might be the key to saving thousands of lives. They slipped back to the warehouse, trying to remain inconspicuous. Night cloaked the city in a hush, broken only by the call of distant watchmen and the occasional bark of a stray dog. As Bronn walked those half-familiar streets, old memories tugged at him, climbing from brothel windows, swaggering through tavern doors, counting coins from Lannister purses. It felt strange now, to be risking his neck for a cause larger than his own pockets. But he reminded himself that pockets were precisely why he was doing this. He wanted them well lined once the dust settled. And maybe, just maybe, a small part of him wanted to see fewer bodies littering the city streets. He'd seen enough war to last a lifetime. Back at the warehouse, they waited in tense silence. Dawn came, then midday, then evening. The hours stretched like a taut wire. No sign of Sir Miles. Bronn tried to distract himself by honing his daggers, pacing the floor. His companions looked equally restless. Outside, the city's bustle rose and fell, never quite sleeping. Finally, night descended again. They ventured out, heading to the same cellar, hearts pounding at every noise in the alleyway. If this was a trap, it would be sprung soon. But they pressed on. Bronn's hand lingered on his hilt as he pushed open the cellar door. Torchlight flickered inside. Sir Miles stood there, alone this time, tension evident in the tightness of his posture. He wore a dark cloak over his armor, hood drawn up. He motioned Bronn forward. "I showed the letter to the Captain General," Miles said, voice barely above a whisper. "He doesn't dismiss it, but he's wary. We have our honor to consider." "Honor?" Bronn snorted. "We're all sellswords here. Even sellswords have codes." Miles shot back with some indignation. "But he also knows Cersei's position is precarious. He wants proof of your sincerity in a private meeting somewhere safe, away from prying eyes. Then he might consider your offer." "Then..." Bronn gave a short nod. "We can do that. We have a stash of gold to show as a down payment, enough to prove we're serious." Miles rubbed his jaw. "Yes, about that. He wants to see the gold personally. But if we try to move it through the streets, we risk notice. You'll bring him to it instead. Tomorrow night, a location near the outskirts of Flea Bottom. An abandoned stable. No guards." Bronn chewed on his lip. "No guards on your side either?" Miles hesitated. "I'll bring 2 men for safety. And I'll be there. That's it." Bronn glanced at his companion, then back to Miles. "We'll have 2 of our own, including me, for safety. That's the deal. No more, no less." Miles considered, then nodded. "Agreed." They hammered out the details. The time, the approach, the signs to ensure there was no ambush. Once all was set, Miles slipped back into the night, leaving Bronn to wonder if they were walking into a trap. The next 24 hours crawled by. Bronn and his men scouted the stable Miles had indicated, a run-down structure on the edge of a narrow street in Flea Bottom, half sunken into the muddy ground. They decided to bring only one of the gold chests, a smaller one, leaving the other behind as insurance. As the appointed hour arrived, Bronn readied himself. He wore a simple leather jerkin, dagger at his side, sword strapped to his waist. His companion from Varys Network, a man named Joss, handled the chest, each carrying a corner so they could move quickly if needed. The other ally stayed behind with the remaining chest. They crept through the twisting alleys, stepping over puddles of foul water, avoiding drunks and petty thieves. Eventually, they reached the stable. Its door hung crooked, creaking in the breeze. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof. Inside, the dirt floor was trodden down. Empty stalls lined the walls, half collapsed. A single lantern burned on a post. Sir Miles was already there, along with a tall, lean man in more ornate Golden Company armor, Harry Strickland, presumably, and another guard. They stood by the lantern, watchful. Bronn and Joss approached slowly, setting the chest down a few paces away. "That's far enough," Strickland said, voice carrying the clipped diction of a seasoned commander. "Open the chest." Bronn glanced at Joss, who knelt and opened the lid. The lantern's glow illuminated rows of gold coins. It wasn't a vast fortune, but enough to fill a man's palms and speak volumes of a promise. Strickland's eyes flicked to the coins, face unreadable. "So," Bronn said, clearing his throat, "that's the sample. There's more where that came from. If you take our offer, you'll get your pick of the spoils once Daenerys sits the Iron Throne. Lands, titles, gold, you name it. The Targaryens want a peaceful transition if possible, to spare the city. You help them achieve that, they'll reward you." "Then sour." Strickland regarded Bronn with a mix of interest and skepticism. "And if I say no?" Bronn shrugged. "Then we part ways, and you hope you can fend off dragons with scorpions. If you succeed, you'll have your pay from Cersei. But I doubt it'll be easy. And if the city falls, well, you know what happens to the defenders." "Thou." Strickland's expression remained stony. "We pride ourselves on our reputation. The Golden Company does not break contracts." "True," Bronn conceded. "But you can choose to interpret that contract in many ways. If Cersei can't pay or is dethroned, your contract might be void. Or if you believe that continuing the fight is hopeless, you might find a more honorable path by preventing civilian slaughter. The letter from the hand of the Queen should clarify things." Strickland tapped his foot, considering. Then he looked to Miles, who nodded in reassurance. The Captain General stepped closer, peering into the chest. He reached in, grabbed a handful of coins, let them clink through his fingers. "How do we know the Targaryen Queen won't just execute us as traitors once the war is won?" Bronn's mouth twitched. "Because that's not how you unite a realm. She wants peace, not continued rebellion. Granting you lands and pardons is more likely to keep you loyal. Besides, the Hand of the Queen gave his word. He's not known for going back on it." Strickland exhaled. "A large portion of our men are Stormland born. It's been years since they saw their homes. If they believed they could serve the rightful queen and come home with gold in their pockets and a plot of land, perhaps they'd be swayed. There's nothing certain in war, Bronn said. But this is the best offer you'll get. Cersei is cunning, but I'm not sure even she can outmaneuver dragons and half the realm. Don't wait too long to make your choice. Strickland stared at him. Then slowly, he extended his hand to clasp Bronn's forearm. Give us time to prepare. When the Targaryen host approaches the city, we'll decide how best to proceed. If we stand down or turn on Cersei's defenders, it'll be swift and decisive. But if we sense trickery, you won't, Bronn said. I'll go back north with a message to the Targaryens. Tyrion will wait for a sign from you. If you do as promised, the city might be spared. Strickland nodded. Then we have an accord for now. Relief began to seep through Bronn, though he didn't dare show it. They carefully arranged further details. Signals, approximate timing, how to handle the dragons overhead. Meanwhile, the guard closed the chest, taking it as an assurance of good faith. Strickland agreed that this down payment would remain hidden away until the final decision was made. But just as they were concluding, a sudden sound outside the stable made everyone freeze. A scuffle of boots, a muffled shout. Steel hissed as it was drawn. Bronn whipped around, heart hammering, and glimpsed torchlight flooding in through the gaps in the wall. Voices barked. In there! Move! Strickland cursed, reached for his own sword. This is a trap. Bronn had no time to protest. He could see silhouettes charging forward. Gold cloaks, by the look of them, or perhaps Lannister guards. Had Cersei's spies gotten wind of this meeting? Possibly. We have to move, he hissed. Too late. The stable door burst open. A half-dozen men in gold-trimmed armor rushed in, swords raised. Stand down in the name of the queen, one shouted. They brandished torches, revealing panicked expressions as they surveyed the group. Strickland let out a furious growl, brandishing his weapon. Fools! Bronn rolled to the side, ducking behind a stall door. Joss raised a short sword and tried to parry an incoming blow. Miles Yu slammed into a guard, knocking him aside. The stable erupted into chaos as torches flew, steel clashed, and the stench of fear mingled with hay and manure. Bronn lashed out at the nearest guard, driving his dagger into the man's thigh, then twisting away. Another guard lunged, but Strickland cut him down in a smooth arc. Joss took a nasty cut to the arm, stumbling back. Miles barked orders, trying to keep the violence contained. The fight was wild, brutal, and short. The gold cloaks were outmatched by professional sellswords and a cunning cutthroat like Bronn. 4 of the guards fell quickly, leaving 2 wounded and frightened. One tried to flee through the door, but Miles drove a sword between his ribs. The last guard staggered against a stall, blood flowing from a rent in his armor. Bronn whipped around, breathing hard to see if any more were coming. Shouts sounded from outside, a second group of footsteps. They didn't have time to drag the gold away. They had to vanish. Go, now, he shouted to Strickland. The captain general hesitated, gazing at the chest. But the renewed clamor of approaching soldiers made up his mind. Miles with me, he barked. His lieutenant nodded. They darted into the shadows, presumably for a rear exit. Joss clutched his wounded arm, turning to Bronn. We can't get out the way we came? Bronn spotted a side door half obscured by broken boards. This way. He pushed Joss forward, adrenaline surging. Torches bobbed outside, men shouting. He broke the rusted latch with a quick kick. The door opened onto a cramped alley. They slipped out into the night, hearts pounding. Behind them, more gold cloaks swarmed the stable. A scattered few saw their fleeing forms. Stop them! Someone yelled, but the alley was narrow, winding, perfect for losing pursuers in the warren of Flea Bottom. Bronn led Joss through the labyrinth, ignoring the throbbing in his own muscles. They vaulted over debris, sloshed through puddles of foul liquid, ducked under a fallen beam. The distant shouts grew fainter, though once or twice they heard pursuers on their tail. After what felt like an eternity, they collapsed behind a crumbling wall, panting. Joss's arm bled freely. Bronn tore a strip of cloth from his shirt, bound the wound tight. "We need to get back to the warehouse," he hissed. Joss shook his head. "It might be compromised. They could already be there." Bronn spat. "We have no choice. The other chest is there. If we lose it, we lose the only proof we have for the Golden Company. Tyrion's plan hinges on that goal." Reluctantly, they slunk through side streets, hearts hammering at every shadow. King's Landing, in the grip of Cersei's tyranny, had become a nest of watchers and whisperers. Eventually, they slipped back into the warehouse by a rear window. Inside, their other companion looked alarmed, but relieved to see them. "What happened?" he whispered. "We got jumped," Bronn growled. "Gold cloaks must have gotten wind somehow. We killed a half dozen, but more are looking for us, no doubt. We need to move." They sealed up what they could, took the second chest, and fled. With the city's alarm raised, they had to abandon the wagon. Bronn led them on a nerve-wracking journey through the slums, bribing who they could, cutting the throats of those who recognized them, and threatened to raise the alarm. By the time they reached the mud gate at dawn, the city was in partial lockdown. Still, the chaos worked in their favor. Rumors of a traitorous plot involving sellswords and the Golden Company had spread, so the guards were busy searching elsewhere. A few bribes and a cunning ruse about a plague outbreak got them through the gates. Once on the road, they spurred their horses south, then cut west, then north again, zigzagging to throw off any pursuit. Days later, exhausted and battered, they reached the Targaryen war camp, or what had been the war camp. In their absence, Daenerys' forces had begun marching south, gathering near Harrenhal as a staging point. Bronn found them on the march, columns of soldiers trailing behind, dragons spotted overhead. Tyrion and Jaime rode near the vanguard, scanning the horizon anxiously. When they saw Bronn, their eyes widened with alarm. "You look half dead," Tyrion said as Bronn slid off his horse, nearly collapsing. "What happened?" Bronn wasted no time. "We made contact with the Golden Company. They're open to a deal, but someone caught wind. Gold cloaks attacked us. We barely got out alive." Jaime frowned deeply, glancing at the ragged gash on Joss's arm. "Is the deal still on?" Bronn exhaled shakily. "I think so." Strickland seemed interested. "They got a chunk of our gold, so they know we're serious. But the city's on high alert now." Tyrion exchanged a look with Jaime. "We'll have to move carefully. If Cersei suspects the Golden Company might turn, she'll tighten her grip on them. But at least they've heard our offer." "Then?" Bronn handed Tyrion the second chest key. "We kept some gold in case you need it for other bribes, but we couldn't get the rest back. That's in the city, with Strickland, or captured by the gold cloaks. I'm not certain." Tyrion nodded gravely. "You did well, Bronn." Daenerys approached then, regal yet somber, her silver hair reflecting the pale sunlight. She assessed Bronn's injuries, the lines of fatigue carved into his face. "You risked much." "Thank you. We'll ensure your wounds are tended." "No." Bronn dipped his head. "As long as you remember my price when we're done." A ghost of a smile touched Daenerys' lips. "I never forget a debt." And so Bronn, half by accident and half by choice, had betrayed Cersei and set into motion the possible salvation of King's Landing, or at least a less bloody sacking. In the days that followed, word came that Harry Strickland had indeed begun sounding out his officers, discreetly assessing how many might be willing to stand down. But Cersei, growing ever more paranoid, stationed Qyburns' new experiments along the walls, readied wildfire caches, and threatened to raise the city herself if Daenerys tried to take it. The final confrontation loomed, the pieces on the board shifting with every rumor and every betrayal. Through it all, Bronn stayed by Tyrion and Jaime's side, at least for the time being. When the great host of Targaryen forces finally approached the walls of King's Landing, catapults and scorpions bristling from every tower, the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. High atop the battlements, Cersei waited, her swollen belly visible beneath regal gowns, her eyes set like flint. Euron Greyjoy's fleet lingered in Blackwater Bay, ready to unleash a storm of bolts if the dragons came too close. Yet as Daenerys' army drew up ranks outside the city, as siege engines rattled into place, as dragons roared overhead, something unexpected happened in the Golden Company's ranks. At a key moment, Just as Cersei's archers readied themselves, the Sellswords lowered their weapons. Under Strickland's command, they parted, allowing Daenerys' cavalry a path toward the gate. Whispers spread like wildfire. The Golden Company was refusing to fight. The city's defenders panicked, uncertain. From a vantage point on a nearby hill, Bronn watched alongside Tyrion, Jaime, and Daenerys herself. His heart pounded. If Cersei ordered the Scorpions to fire, dragons could burn the city. If she unleashed wildfire, tens of thousands might die. But if the Golden Company truly turned, he saw the gates open slightly. Some portion of Cersei's men rushed to hold them, confusion in their ranks. The Golden Company engaged them. A brief clash that ended swiftly. The Sellswords gained control of the gate mechanism, throwing it wide. Daenerys' forces surged forward, though Tyrion shouted for them to hold back, to avoid a slaughter. But the momentum of war was difficult to halt. And then, atop the walls, Cersei appeared. Even from a distance, Bronn could see her expression, twisted in rage, in desperation. She had her child to protect, her throne to cling to. But now the city watch was divided. Many knelt, some fought. Fires sprang up in pockets. Tyrion insisted they ring the bells if the city was yielding, to signal a surrender and prevent the dragons from unleashing their fury. Bells rang out across King's Landing, a clamorous, echoing peal that caused soldiers on both sides to pause, uncertain. Daenerys hovered on Dragonback with Drogon, prepared to strike if needed. But the city was giving up, in fits and starts. The Golden Company had turned. Cersei's last loyalists were outnumbered. She stood there, watching the realm slip through her fingers. In that moment, Bronn almost felt pity for her. Almost. When the gates were finally secure, and the Lannister banners torn down, Daenerys and her forces entered the city. The people cowered or wept in relief, unsure if they were saved or simply under new rulers. Tyrion and Jaime rode at the front, calling for calm, urging no violence against civilians. The Golden Company formally bent the knee, their commander presenting Cersei's captured officers as proof of their compliance. A few pockets of resistance lingered, but by the time sun set behind the broken rooftops, King's Landing was effectively in Targaryen hands. Cersei retreated to the Red Keep, refusing to surrender, determined to hold out. But Qyburn's Scorpions were seized by the Golden Company, or destroyed in skirmishes. Euron Greyjoy's fleet scattered once news of the city's surrender spread. He fled, or tried to, some said. Others claimed he died in a final futile stand. Bronn was present when Jaime and Tyrion confronted Cersei in the throne room. Daenerys stood behind them, flanked by unsullied guards. Her expression cold and regal. The chamber echoed with footsteps on the marble floors. The Iron Throne loomed, an ugly mass of twisted steel. Cersei stood before it. Shoulders set, a hand protectively over her belly. Her eyes blazed with defiance. "You've finally won, you treacherous dogs," she spat. "But you'll never keep the throne. The people will rise against you. My child." Jaime held out a hand. "It's over, Cersei. No more blood needs to be spilled. Surrender, and you'll be granted mercy. For the sake of the child." Da. Tears brimmed in her eyes, though she fought them. She looked at Tyrion, then at Daenerys, and finally at Bronn, standing near the rear. A bitter laugh escaped her. "You made a fool's choice, Sellsword. You think she'll reward you in the end?" Bronn said nothing, gripping the hilt of his sword. Cersei's voice cracked. "I was ready to give you everything, but you turned on me. A cunning choice, for now. But betrayers eventually meet their end." Tyrion stepped forward. "That's enough. The city has surrendered. You can do the same, and the Queen will spare you. Or," Daenerys' cool voice cut in, "or you can die, Cersei Lannister." Cersei stared at the Dragon Queen, trembling with rage and fear. Slowly, she unclasped the brooch that held her cloak. It fell away, revealing the swell of her stomach more plainly. "And what of my child?" she asked, tears sliding down her cheeks. Daenerys paused, glancing at Tyrion. The child is innocent. If you surrender unconditionally, you'll be placed under guard. Your child will be taken care of, provided for. I won't stain my reign with the blood of babes. But you, Cersei, must stand trial for your crimes. The fate of your crown rests with the realm. If you are found guilty, you'll face your sentence. No. Cersei's lip quivered. She looked at Jaime desperately. Don't let this happen. Jaime's eyes were filled with sadness. You brought this on yourself, Cersei. You refused to help us fight the dead. You plotted against your own family, against the realm. Please, let it end. Don't make this any harder. For a moment she seemed ready to lash out, to do something drastic. Then the fight left her. Her shoulders slumped, her face drawn. She sank to her knees on the cold marble floor, tears falling freely. Gold rings clattered from her fingers as she tore them off, flinging them aside. I yield, she whispered. For my child. Daenerys nodded slowly. 2 unsullied guards advanced, gently but firmly helping Cersei stand. The queen was led away, a prisoner, in her own castle. Jaime followed at a distance, expression hollow. Tyrion stood by Daenerys, relief mixing with lingering tension. In the shadows near the pillars, Bronn let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He half expected some last twist of the knife, some hidden stash of wildfire igniting to consume them all. But it seemed the danger had passed. One cunning betrayal had saved the realm from a fiery annihilation. Later, amid the aftermath of surrender and the slow process of restoring order, Tyrion found Bronn in a corridor overlooking the city. The stench of smoke and fear still hung in the air. People were picking up the pieces, burying their dead, though thankfully not as many as there might have been had the city fought to the bitter end. Tyrion stood beside Bronn, gazing at the broken rooftops and the battered walls. You did it, he said quietly. You saved thousands of lives, and you'll have your reward. Bronn snorted softly. I did it for myself, Lannister. Don't get sentimental on me. Tyrion's eyes flicked to him. Regardless of motive, you were instrumental. We'd have seen far more bloodshed if the Golden Company hadn't turned. Bronn nodded. So, about that reward? A faint smile touched Tyrion's lips. Yes. Let's see. Highgarden's vacant, but it's rather large, and Daenerys may have other plans. Perhaps something nearer the coast if you prefer. Or maybe you just want gold and a small holdfast. We'll work it out. I promise. Then to roll. Bronn gazed at the ruined city, exhaling slowly. Right now, all I want is a stiff drink and a soft bed. The rest can wait. Tyrion patted his shoulder. Done. And so Bronn, the sellsword who had once fought dragons, found himself hailed, by some quietly, as one of the men who'd prevented King's Landing from going up in flames. Whispers of his role would spread through the taverns and brothels, no doubt embellishing his cunning and bravery beyond measure. In truth, he had simply followed the gold and the best chance of survival. Yet in doing so, he had unwittingly spared the realm another cataclysmic bloodbath. As Daenerys took her seat on the Iron Throne, at least temporarily, and the realm began to grapple with a new order, Bronn stood aside, content to let the lords and ladies squabble. He had played his part, at no small risk. For once, he allowed himself a faint measure of pride. Not for heroics exactly, but for having the presence of mind to back the right cause at the right time. Cersei would stand trial eventually, the details to be decided by a great council or some new arrangement. Tyrion was plotting. The city, battered but unburned, would slowly mend. Jaime, weary and guilt-stricken, would find some measure of solace in what he had done to prevent further slaughter, while Tyrion tried to help Daenerys establish her reign without descending into tyranny herself. And Bronn? He would drink his fill, pocket his gold, and maybe, just maybe, find that castle with a steward to handle the tedious bits. As he walked away from the Red Keep that twilight, the sky tinted pink by the fading sun, he grinned to himself, thinking how much better this ending was than dying in a pile of rubble or burning beneath dragonfire. Betraying Cersei Lannister had proven to be the smartest gamble he'd ever made. And for a man like Bronn, That was the only victory that truly mattered. Bronn's first night of relative peace in King's Landing was spent not in a lavish bedchamber, nor in the arms of a paid companion, but in a crumbling inn whose common room smelled of old ale and rat droppings. He had to laugh at the irony. The city was effectively under new management now. Daenerys Targaryen had claimed it without a proper sack, though there had been blood spilled in pockets of resistance. Yet, in this moment of triumphant calm, while other lords and ladies sought comfortable quarters in the Red Keep or commandeered noble houses, Bronn was sleeping with fleas and cracked floorboards. He didn't much mind. He'd had enough excitement for a while, enough days where every scrape of a blade could mean his death. Now at last he could close his eyes without worrying that half the realm wanted him strung up. Or at least, he hoped so. There were always consequences yet to unfold, but he tried not to dwell on that too much. The next morning, sunlight streamed through an unshuttered window, warming his face. He woke sore but alive, the smells of fried onions and cheap wine drifting up from below. After a moment of blinking at the dusty beams overhead, he forced himself to his feet, rolling his shoulders to loosen stiff muscles. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a dented piece of metal propped against the wall. His hair was longer than it had been, streaked with dust and sweat, and he sported a few bruises that had turned a sickly yellow. Still, he was in one piece. He strapped on his sword belt, patted the sheathed dagger at his side, and clumped down the rickety stairs into the inn's main room. A few Sellswords, former Lannister guards, no doubt, slouched at a table in the corner, picking at a bowl of boiled peas. When they saw Bronn, one of them gave a wordless nod that might have been respect or wariness. Bronn noted the battered armor they wore, and decided they must be out of a job, or soon to be, now that the city had surrendered. At the bar, an older man with wiry hair was ladling out watery stew. Bronn slapped a couple of coins on the counter. "Got something better than that slop?" The innkeeper hesitated, then gave a shrug. "Eggs, maybe. Some bread. Not much left since the Queen's men came through." Bronn nodded. "Eggs it is." As he waited for breakfast, he watched the street through the open door. King's Landing was waking under a new order. Civilians shuffled past, some clearly exhausted, some guardedly curious. A pair of unsullied marched by, faces impassive, their spears gleaming in the sun. Behind them, a handful of Dothraki ambled in that loose, confident stride of theirs, braids swinging. More city folk parted for them, eyeing them with a mix of unease and relief. Unease at these fierce foreign warriors, relief that the fighting seemed to have ended without half the city turning to ash. Eventually, the innkeeper set a small wooden plate in front of Bronn, 3 half-burnt eggs, a chunk of stale bread, and a mug of watered-down wine. Not exactly a feast, but Bronn wolfed it down. A sellsword had to eat while he could. When he finished, he slung his cloak around his shoulders and stepped outside, squinting against the bright morning light. Somewhere in the higher districts, Daenerys Targaryen was likely meeting with her new council, or with Tyrion, figuring out how to run this city. According to rumor, Cersei had been placed in a tower cell in the Red Keep, under guard. Jaime visited her from time to time, but from all accounts, she had grown silent and withdrawn. The city's future hung on what Daenerys would do next. Bronn half expected to be summoned soon. Tyrion had promised him a reward. But Tyrion had more urgent matters to handle first: chaos to quell, people to feed, and a looming question of how to deal with war criminals. Bronn decided to find the imp on his own. Too often in this city, the wheel of power turned behind closed doors, and if you weren't careful, you'd get crushed. He made his way up the cobblestone streets, winding toward the Red Keep. The air felt strange, stale and newly scrubbed all at once, as if the city was trying to rid itself of old ghosts. Guards wearing the Targaryen sigil stood at key intersections, but they let him pass once they recognized him, or at least deduced he wasn't a threat. He passed people hauling rubble from collapsed buildings, some wrecked in the brief fighting, others ruined from neglect. There were lines of hungry refugees outside makeshift kitchens set up by Daenerys people. The smell of cooking meat made Bronn's stomach rumble again, but he kept moving. At the Red Keep's gates, he was intercepted by 2 unsullied with short spears. Their leader was a man Bronn recognized, though he didn't know his name, one of Grey Worm's sub-commanders, presumably. The man held up a hand. "The hand of the queen is in session," he said in halting common tongue. "No one may pass without permission." Bronn gave a half-smile. "I'm expected." He doubted that was entirely true, but Tyrion had promised him an audience soon enough. The Unsullied studied him. "Name yourself." "Bronn of the Blackwater. I fought with your queen's forces. We saved the city from going up in flames. I'm here to speak with Tyrion Lannister." "Menderol." The Unsullied exchanged a glance, then stepped aside. One motion for Bronn to follow. They led him through the outer courtyard, where a few Targaryen banners hung listlessly in the mild breeze. The three-headed dragon stark against crimson cloth. Several large scorpions, the sort that once had been installed on the walls to kill dragons, lay dismantled in heaps. Workers were prying metal plates from them, possibly to melt down or repurpose. Inside the keep, the hallways bustled with guards, servants, and unfamiliar faces. Bronn had been here before, countless times, usually in the shadows, or at Tyrion's side, or sneaking in to see Jaime. Now it felt altogether different. The sense of dread that once clung to the corridors when Cersei reigned had eased, replaced by a nervous energy. Change was coming, but no one quite knew what form that change would take. He was brought to the throne room, where the Iron Throne loomed. Bronn had half expected to see Daenerys perched upon it, but she wasn't there. Instead, a cluster of individuals in Targaryen livery stood near the base of the dais, going over lists and ledgers. Tyrion was among them, holding a piece of parchment as he spoke in a clipped, urgent tone. "And we must allocate more grain to Flea Bottom, else we risk riots. If the harvest from the Reach is not enough, then we'll negotiate with Dorne." He looked up at the sound of footsteps. His gaze landed on Bronn, a spark of relief in his eyes. "Ah, you've arrived. Good." Tyrion folded the parchment and handed it to one of the stewards. "See to it," he said, and the steward hurried off. Then Tyrion motioned for Bronn to follow him into a side passage that led to what used to be a small antechamber. Inside, the walls were lined with dusty tapestries that depicted old Targaryen victories. A single table stood in the center, loaded with scattered scrolls, sealing wax, and a half-empty carafe of wine. A pair of chairs faced each other. Tyrion ushered Bronn to sit. "You look hungry," Tyrion observed. "I've had worse breakfasts," Bronn said, settling in the chair with a weary shrug. "And I'm used to a bit of discomfort. The question is, how soon are you going to fix that problem for me? Because I was promised a reward for not putting a bolt in your chest." "Bam?" Tyrion let out a small snort. "You haven't changed. Very well. I'll be blunt. Daenerys has not decided exactly how to distribute the lands of traitors, or those who died without heirs. Highgarden is still vacant, but we need to determine if a Tyrell cousin might emerge with a claim. Some old alms-giver or distant relative might appear out of the shadows. In the meantime, there are other options." Bronn tapped his fingers on the table. "Give me something I can manage." "Some castle that's not too big, but big enough to impress. I don't mind a ruin if it comes with enough coin and men to rebuild. Or if you just want to give me a fat purse and an estate near the sea, do as well." Tyrion rubbed his temple. "All in good time, dear Sellsword. The Queen's priority is stabilizing the city and realm. She has no desire to repeat her father's mistakes. We'll see you settled, I promise. But first—" Bronn's brows pinched. "But first what?" Tyrion sighed. "I need your help again." Bronn let out a groan, half amused, half exasperated. "Every time I think I'm done being useful, you reel me back in." "Spit it out." Tyrion reached for the carafe of wine and poured a generous amount into 2 cups. He slid one across to Bronn. "For old time's sake," he said, lifting his own. Bronn took it, sniffed it. It smelled decent, and drank. Tyrion sipped, his eyes drifting to a tapestry that showed some ancient Targaryen cavalry charge. "There are still threats," Tyrion said softly. "The city is ours, But the realm is not entirely united. We have pockets of resistance in the Crownlands, men loyal to Cersei, or to some dream of Lannister vengeance. We also have to consider the Iron Fleet. Euron may be dead. Rumors say he was killed trying to flee, but some of his men remain. More than that, Daenerys fears that certain lords might conspire to topple her the moment she turns her back. And Bronn leaned back in his chair. What does any of that have to do with me? You've got an army, unsullied, Dothraki, the Golden Company, who, by the way, switched sides. Let them deal with stragglers. Tyrion gave a weary shrug. They are. But we need men with cunning. We need eyes and ears in the less savory corners of the city and beyond. Varys had a network, but it's in disarray. The Queen wants stability, not endless bloodshed. Yet some conspirators only understand violence. Then? So you want me to… What? Bronn asked, waving a hand. Play executioner? Or spy master? Tyrion set down his cup. I want you to do what you do best. Cut through the nonsense. You know this city's underbelly. You know how to handle men who might be bribed or threatened. Help me ensure no rebellious pockets remain that could spark chaos. Bronn chortled. You want me to become some sort of enforcer? Sniffing out treachery. Precisely. Within reason, of course, Tyrion said, though his voice carried a hint of discomfort. I wouldn't ask you to kill half the city, but if you can quietly remove certain dangerous elements, we'll all sleep easier. And in return, I'll see that your reward is not just a promise but a reality. Bronn eyed Tyrion. You're a sly little shit, aren't you? Tyrion mustered a faint grin. I prefer clever, but I've been called worse. There was a brief silence. Bronn considered the proposition. He'd been dreaming of simply riding off into the sunset with a mountain of gold and a nice castle. But he also recognized that half the realm was in flux. If he departed too soon, he might lose out on the best portion of the spoils. And besides, Tyrion had a point. The city could yet descend into chaos. Best to secure his position while the new regime took root. All right, Bronn said at last. I'll help you keep the peace, for a price. But I want coin, enough to hire some good swords, so I'm not wandering alone into every damn pit in Flea Bottom. Now, you'll have it, Tyrion agreed. Go speak with Sir Davos, who's assisting with City Watch reorganization, and Grey Worm, who handles the Unsullied. Tell them you're working on my behalf. You can gather a small retinue of men, a mix you trust. The Golden Company's captains have leftover sellswords eager for coin. Use who you must. Bronn raised his cup in a mock toast. Fine. Gall. Let's see if I can flush out any troublemakers while you and your queen figure out who gets which seat of power. Nendro. Tyrion's lips curved. You'll find me in the Tower of the Hand when you have updates. Bronn downed the rest of his wine in a single gulp, set the cup aside, and rose. I'll get on with it. And Tyrion, don't forget, if my reward vanishes again, I'm liable to do something you won't like. Tyrion rolled his eyes. I've heard that tune before. Now go keep the city safe, you avaricious scoundrel. Bronn snorted a laugh and left. The corridors of the Red Keep felt less forbidding than they once had, though a certain tension still lurked in corners. Daenerys' men were disciplined, but the city's mood was unpredictable. He found his way outside, blinking at the sudden brightness of the courtyard. First on his list was finding Sir Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, whom Bronn respected more than most. The man was straightforward and had proven decently clever in his own right, helping Stannis once upon a time, then fighting alongside Jon Snow. Now he was assisting with the unglamorous tasks of governance, feeding people, reorganizing watch patrols, mending walls. Eventually, Bronn learned Davos was at the Mudgate, inspecting the efforts to repair the battered portcullis. So Bronn headed there, weaving through the throngs of small folk. In places, the mood was somewhat hopeful. Merchants reopened stalls. Children ran about with scraps of bread. In other pockets, soot and fresh bloodstains told a grimmer story. By the time he reached the gate, Bronn was sweating under the midday sun. He spotted Davos standing with a cluster of watchmen, gesturing at the half-broken wooden structures. Davos looked tired, but he was giving instructions calmly, urging them to reinforce the timbers. When he saw Bronn approaching, he excused himself from the group. "Sir Bronn," Davos said in that low, gravelly voice, "what brings you down here?" "I'm on orders from the hand of the Queen," Bronn said with a wry twist of his mouth. "He wants me to root out trouble. Told me to talk to you about how best to gather men and coordinate with the Watch." "Now?" Davos scratched the neatly trimmed beard he'd grown in recent months. "Root out trouble, eh? That's a tall order in King's Landing. The City Watch is in tatters. Some surrendered. Some died. A handful remain loyal, but we've had to fill ranks with new recruits, many of whom just want steady pay or the chance to hold a spear and act important." Bronn nodded. "A few good men and a few cutthroats. That's all I need for now. I'll do the rest, which likely means intimidation, bribes, a bit of well-placed violence. The usual." "And now?" Davos sighed. "Well, I can't say I like that approach, but I won't pretend it's unnecessary. There are rumors of Lannister holdouts in the backstreets, plus some ex-Lannister guards who might be working with Qyburn's leftover projects. We can't leave that to fester." "Exactly," Bronn said. "So who do I talk to about enlisting men I can trust?" "Go see Captain Roland near the Dragon Pit. He's in charge of watch recruitment. Let him know you've my approval, and Lord Tyrion's. He'll assign you some volunteers, though they might be green as spring grass. For veterans, you may have better luck with the Golden Company. Harry Strickland is working out his men's new roles, but I suspect more than a few would rather roam in a smaller group for quick coin." "Dine." Bronn considered that. "A mix of City Watch and sellswords might do. Thanks, Onion Knight." Davos managed a small grin. "Just keep the bloodshed to a minimum if you can. We're all weary of war. If you find ex-Lannister loyalists who might be reasoned with, reason with them. I won't shed tears over men who refuse to surrender, but we want to prove this is a just and merciful reign." "Dender," Bronn snorted. "A tall order indeed, but I'll try to keep the city from turning into one big corpse pile." With that, he and Davos parted ways. Bronn made for the Dragon Pit next, where the Watch had established a staging area, along with some Targaryen troops. The Dragon Pit, once a grand structure that housed the Targaryen dragons long ago, had crumbled over centuries of neglect. Now it served as a convenient open space for large gatherings or mustering soldiers. When Bronn arrived, he found a motley mix indeed. Unsullied patrolled in crisp formation, but the City Watch formed a looser ring of men in mismatched gear, some carrying short swords, some spears. At one edge, half a dozen Golden Company soldiers stood around, wearing partial plate with the golden skull sigil on the breast. They looked bored, occasionally casting glances at one of Daenerys' dragons that soared far overhead, a dark speck against the clouds. Captain Roland was easy to spot. He wore a tabard with the new Targaryen crest, a fresh-faced man in his 20s with carefully combed brown hair. Bronn had seen him about once or twice in passing. Roland was in the midst of chewing out a pair of watchmen for sleeping on duty. When Bronn approached, the young captain dismissed the two watchmen and straightened, clearing his throat. "You're Sir Bronn, yes?" he asked. And though his tone was formal, Bronn could see the nerves behind his eyes. "I'm told I can pick a few men for some special tasks. Davos said to speak to you." Roland nodded. "You may, if you have the hand's blessing. I've got about 20 men who showed some promise, though they're green. We can't spare more than that. The rest I need on the walls and gates." Bronn studied the loose ranks. "I'll take 8. I don't want a big crowd. Just enough to watch my back." Roland's shoulders sagged, perhaps relieved that Bronn wasn't asking for a whole company. "Very well. I'll point them out to you. They're half veteran, half new recruits who can read and follow instructions." "Reading's optional," Bronn muttered, eyeing the watch. "But I guess it won't hurt." One by one, Roland called out names. Sir Jairus, a lanky older man with salt and pepper hair who'd served the watch for years. Alyssa, a wiry woman with quick eyes, who apparently had proven herself handy with a bow. And a handful more, Torgen, Belden, Finn, Wes, Ott, and Mike. They lined up awkwardly, eyeing Bronn with some mixture of curiosity and wariness. "All right," Bronn said, crossing his arms. "Listen well, because we're not going to be marching in neat lines or patrolling the same old streets. We're going to find trouble before it spreads. If you stick with me, do as I say, you'll earn coin. If you decide to get squeamish or moralize, you can go back to the watch ranks." "Understood." "Nan Chao." They murmured assent. Alyssa lifted her chin. "What sort of trouble exactly?" "Remnants of Cersei's loyalists, criminals, conspirators who'd love to see the Targaryens fail," Bronn said. "Could be in Flea Bottom or a brothel in the Street of Silk. Could be a noble's townhouse up near the Hill of Rainies. We'll figure it out as we go." They exchanged glances. No one protested outright. Captain Roland nodded to Bronn. "They're yours. Keep them alive if you can. The City Watch has lost enough men already." "Then so." Bronn shrugged. "I won't fling them onto pikes, I promise." Next, he looked toward the Golden Company men loitering nearby. They were busy sharpening weapons or playing at dice. Bronn strolled over, a smirk tugging at his mouth. "You lot feel like earning extra coin? I've got a special assignment courtesy of the Hand." One of them, a big man with a scar across his cheek, snorted. "We get paid already by the Targaryen Queen. Why should we follow you?" Bronn shot a glance at the City Watch behind him. "Because I can pay you more for less risk. We're not going into open battle. We're sniffing out pockets of resistance. You join me, you'll have first pick of confiscated valuables if we run across a secret stash. That's how it works in these operations." They perked up a bit at that. Another of the sellswords, a balding man with a gold ring in one ear, raised an eyebrow. "So, you're basically rummaging for leftover plunder with the Queen's blessing?" "Not exactly." Bronn grinned. "But I can guarantee you'll get your share of whatever we find. Plus some coin from the crown if we solve problems before they turn bloody. Trust me, it's an easier life than standing around waiting for a war that's already ended." "Now." The big man with the scar scratched at his chin. "You were the one who brokered the deal for us, right? The reason we turned on Cersei?" "I was," Bronn confirmed. "Which means you owe me a small favor for ensuring you're not all ashes in a field." The sellsword snorted. "Suppose that's fair. All right. My name's Taryn. This is Varro, Ed, and Mull." He gestured to the others. "We'll give your scheme a try, at least for a while." Bronn nodded. "Good. Welcome aboard. Let's go find ourselves a base of operations." They ended up commandeering an old tavern near the Dragon Pit that had shuttered during the unrest. Bronn's new band, 8 City Watch, 4 Golden Company men, moved tables aside, set up a few cots, and turned it into something like a makeshift headquarters. Bronn also arranged for a donkey cart and a pair of stable hands to remain on standby, in case they needed to haul away goods or prisoners. His next step was to gather information. Word on the street was that some Lannister guards had fled into hiding, forming small gangs that robbed travelers by night. Others said Qyburn's leftover creations lurked somewhere, men twisted by potions and surgeries, or experiments that were best left unspoken. Bronn didn't know how much of that was rumor, but it wasn't entirely unbelievable. Qyburn had always been a disturbing figure. Bronn decided they'd start by paying a visit to a handful of local informants. He knew men who ran gambling dens, or small-time smuggling operations, or brothels that never quite shut down. People who thrived on gossip, and who might share valuable tidbits if they saw a few coins on the table. The first stop was an alehouse in Flea Bottom called the Leaning Hog. The sign above the door was half rotted away, and the hog depicted was missing an ear. Inside, the midday crowd was sparse. A few drunks in corners, a couple of tired laborers sipping watery beer. The proprietor, a gap-toothed woman named Maggie, eyed Bronn warily as he entered with Taryn and Alyssa in tow, leaving the others outside to keep watch. "Well, if it isn't the Blackwater hero himself," Maggie said with a sneer. "Come to break up my furniture or drag away my customers?" Bronn gave a crooked grin. "I'm here for information, Maggie, and I'll pay fair coin if it's useful. Heard any rumors about trouble brewing?" Lannister loyalists, conspirators, that sort of thing? Maggie leaned on the bar. Plenty of rumors. Not sure which are worth hearing, but for a silver dragon, I might recall a few tidbits. Bronn tossed a silver coin on the bar. Maggie snatched it up, biting it to check its authenticity. Then she jerked her head toward a table off to the side, under a sagging beam. There's a group calling themselves the Crimson Cloaks. Supposedly ex-Lannister soldiers. They've been shaking down small folk in the night, demanding loyalty to Queen Cersei. But rumor says it's just a cover for banditry. They wear red cloaks but hide their faces. They've got a safe house somewhere near the Hook, that slum district behind the Foundry. Interesting, Bronn muttered. Anything else? Maggie shrugged. I hear a certain girl in the street of Silk claims she overheard Qyburn's old assistant boasting that he's found a way to replicate that freakish mountain. Some monster with half a face, or something worse? But who's to say if that's true? People love spinning tall tales about Qyburn's horrors. Bronn exchanged a glance with Terran, who looked as though he'd prefer not to meet any half-faced monstrosity in a dark alley. All right, if you hear anything else, let me know. There'll be more silver in it for you. Maggie snorted. Sure, as long as you don't scare off my customers. Bronn, Terran, and Alyssa left the alehouse. Outside, the rest of their group waited, weapons at the ready in case of trouble. Fleabottom was quiet for now, but tension simmered beneath the surface. One could feel it in the furtive glances of passers-by. Crimson Cloaks, Alyssa mused softly. Sounds like they're not just petty thieves. Bronn nodded. Let's find out if they're real. If so, we'll bring them in or cut them down. Either way, we get them off the streets. But first, let's see who else might confirm the tale. Menderwanero. They spent the next few hours prowling Fleabottom. Jairus, the older watch veteran, managed to locate a boy who claimed he'd been robbed by men in red cloaks near the old foundry. Another source swore they saw these cloaks beating a merchant for refusing to pay tribute to Queen Cersei. By late afternoon, Bronn was confident the Crimson Cloaks existed and posed a danger. He decided they'd pay a visit to the Hook that same evening. It was a risk, but if the gang was operating in that slum, a direct confrontation might scatter them, or push them to flee the city. Bronn wanted them caught, or at least forced into surrender. They spent some hours resting, polishing weapons, and formulating a plan. That night, under the cover of darkness, Bronn led his small band to the Hook, a cramped warren of narrow alleys where the stone buildings were so close that neighbors could pass bowls across windows. The gutters ran thick with filth, and the moon was hidden behind a hazy sky. Bronn had Terran, Varro, and Mull take one approach. Alyssa and 3 watchmen took another route to block any escape. Bronn himself led Jairus and the remaining watchmen along the main alley. They walked slowly, listening for any sign of the Crimson Cloaks. Not far in, they heard raised voices, a man yelling a muffled plea. Then the distinct crack of something hitting flesh. Bronn motioned for silence, creeping closer. Through a gap in 2 leaning shacks, he saw a huddle of figures in red cloaks, faces mostly hidden beneath hoods. They had cornered a skinny youth, who lay on the ground, trembling. You owe us 2 silvers, one of the cloaks snarled. We told you, pay your debt or pay with your skin. The youth whimpered. I don't have it truly. My mother's ill, please. The cloak kicked him viciously. Lies. Bronn felt a dark surge in his gut. He gestured for Jairus and the others to fan out. Then, in a loud voice, he barked. Evening, lads. If you're short on coin, maybe we can arrange a funeral. The red-cloaked figures whirled around, yanking out swords or cudgels. One of them hissed, Who the fuck are you? Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, Bronn said, stepping forward, sword half drawn. Here to remind you that Queen Cersei's day is done. If you want to kneel and beg the new queen's mercy, now's the time. They exchanged glances, uncertain. Then one at the back called out, Halyard said we'd retake the city if we stayed loyal. Kill this dog. Bronn sighed. Wrong answer. They charged. Bronn drew steel in a fluid motion, parrying a wild slash from the nearest cloak. He sidestepped, twisted his wrist and slammed his sword's pommel into the man's temple. The cloak dropped with a groan. Another rushed in, brandishing a short axe. Bronn pivoted, letting Jairus thrust a spear from behind. Blood spattered the ground as the cloak collapsed. To the side, 2 more cloaks tried to flank them, but Terran and Varro appeared from a side alley. The Golden Company men fought with lethal precision. Terran's broadsword hacked into a cloak's shoulder, while Varro feinted low before driving his blade into a gut. Alyssa's voice rang out from behind, "Drop your weapons or die." Her group had circled around. Several cloaks turned, realized they were trapped, and 1 or 2 flung down their swords to raise their hands in surrender. But a few fought on, desperation flaring. Bronn ducked under a wild swing, kicked out a man's knee, and clubbed him with his sword hilt. The man went sprawling, and Bronn quickly pinned him. Meanwhile, Jairus disarmed another cloak who screeched curses. Eventually, the alley fell silent except for the groans of the wounded. The youth they'd been beating huddled behind a barrel, eyes wide with terror. Bronn took stock. His group had suffered only minor cuts. 3 of the cloaks lay dead, 4 wounded, and 2 surrendered with arms raised. One had managed to dart away down a cramped passage, but Mull gave chase. Soon Mull returned, dragging the man by the collar. "Found this one lurking behind a crate," Mull said. "No sign of that Halyard fellow, though." Bronn grunted, turning to the trembling captives. "Where's Halyard?" One of them spat blood. "He's not here, obviously. But he's coming for you, you bastard." "Ben?" Bronn rolled his eyes, then smacked the man's head with the flat of his sword just hard enough to make him yelp. "I'll ask again. Where's Halyard?" The man glared, but the other captive, an older fellow with a trembling mustache, blurted, He's in the old tannery by the quay. That's where we meet." Bronn gave a small nod. "Well, that wasn't so hard. Tie them up. We'll take them to the watch cells." As Jairus and the others bound the captives, Bronn crouched by the scared youth, who cowered. "Hey, you all right?" The youth flinched. "Please, don't kill me." "I'm not with them," Bronn said, nodding at the red cloaks. "Go home, or go find a maester for your injuries. Tell them it was the city watch that set you free." The youth managed a shaky nod, then bolted down the alley without another word. Bronn turned back to the red cloaks. "Shall we pay a visit to the old tannery and see if Halyard's there?" Alyssa stepped forward. "We should take these prisoners back first. The tannery can wait until we're fresh, or we risk more trouble than we can handle." Bronn eyed her. He'd been about to suggest going straight there, but she had a point. The group was already weighed down with captives, and they had wounded among them who needed tending. "You're not wrong. All right, we'll secure them in a cell. Let the Queen's men handle their punishment. Then tomorrow we'll flush out Halyard." Terran smirked. "Should be a nice bit of coin in it for us if we bring him in alive, or if we kill him, I doubt they'll complain." Bronn shrugged. "We'll see what Tyrion wants. Let's move." Hauling the prisoners back through the dark alleys was tense, but uneventful. Terran and Varro took turns prodding them forward at sword point. Alyssa led the way with her bow nocked, scanning for ambushes. By the time they reached the city watch barracks, still half in disarray from the regime change, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Roland, the young captain, was roused from his bunk by the arrival of Bronn's group. He stared wide-eyed at the battered men in red cloaks. 7 hells. I'd heard rumors about them. "Good work." Bronn didn't bother with pleasantries. "Lock them up. We'll interrogate them more later. Find out who else might be in their little band. We also have a lead on their leader, Halyard, holed up at the old tannery. We'll go after him soon." "Intel." Roland nodded. "Understood. I'll place extra guards." Bronn let out a breath, exhaustion tugging at him. "I'm off to find a bed for a few hours. Wake me if something urgent comes up." The group dispersed, some heading back to their makeshift tavern headquarters, others to the watch bunkhouse. Bronn found a spare cot in a side room. He dropped onto it, ignoring the stale smell. His body ached, his mind raced with all that needed doing, but eventually he fell into a heavy sleep. When he woke, midday sunlight was streaming through a narrow window. His stomach growled, and his throat felt parched. He swung his legs off the cot, blinking to clear the haze of slumber. Outside the door, He heard voices. Alyssa, Taryn, maybe a couple of watchmen. He stood, stretched, and pushed open the door. In a small corridor, his men had gathered around a young watch recruit who was saying, "Saw them bringing in some dark crate, and the rumor is it came from Keyburn's old lab." Bronn stepped closer. "What's this?" The recruit nearly jumped. "Sir Bronn, I was just telling them that some of the Targaryen guards found a secret cellar under Qyburn's old chambers in the Red Keep. They pulled out strange equipment, jars of God knows what." And Bronn frowned. He remembered the rumors about Qyburn's leftover horrors. "Where'd they take it?" The recruit shrugged. "Not sure. Possibly to the Grand Maester or to be destroyed. The chatter is that Qyburn had been breeding or modifying things. No one's quite certain." Bronn rubbed his jaw. "Last thing we need is monstrous experiments running loose. Let the Queen's men handle that. We've got a more immediate threat. Halyard and his Red Cloak cronies." "Now?" Alyssa nodded. "Ready when you are, sir." Bronn grabbed a mug from a passing watchman's tray, downed the stale water inside, and wiped his mouth. "We'll head to the old tannery. I want to see if Halyard's still there. If he is, we either bring him in alive or put him down. Let's go." They assembled a squad. Bronn, Taryn, Vero, Alyssa, Jairus, and 2 other watchmen. The rest would remain behind in case of new leads, or to guard the prisoners. The old tannery stood near the waterfront, a squat brick building with a sagging roof. Once, its vats would have reeked of lime and rotting hides. Now it was abandoned, the stench mostly faded, but some faint sour tang lingered in the air. Smoke from 100 city chimneys drifted overhead, turning the late afternoon sky a dull gray. Bronn's group approached warily, swords drawn or bows ready. The main door was ajar. Inside, echoing footsteps suggested the place was not as empty as it looked. Bronn motioned for Taryn to circle around the side, while Vero guarded the rear exit. Jairus and Alyssa followed Bronn in through the front, carefully stepping over broken timbers. They found themselves in a dim chamber, half filled with overturned vats. Light streamed in through cracks in the roof. A shape moved behind one of the vats. Jairus tensed, spear at the ready. Alyssa aimed her bow. "Come out," Bronn called, "or we'll fill you with arrows." A sudden burst of movement. 2 men in red cloaks dashed across the chamber, heading for a side corridor. Alyssa loosed an arrow. It caught one man in the leg, and he tumbled with a scream. The other vanished down the corridor. Bronn charged forward, vaulted a broken vat, and followed. Alyssa and Jairus stayed behind to secure the wounded man. The corridor led to a narrower room, with old wooden partitions. A figure waited in the gloom, a man in a red cloak. Hood pushed back, revealing short-cropped brown hair and a scar running from temple to jaw. He brandished a longsword. "You must be Halyard," Bronn said, sword in hand. The man sneered. "I know who you are, Blackwater sellsword. My men told me about you." Bronn shrugged. "They told me about you too. You've got a choice. Surrender or die." Halyard gave a barking laugh. "I've survived worse than you." He lunged, sword flashing. Bronn sidestepped, letting the blade whistle past his shoulder. He countered with a diagonal slash, forcing Halyard to twist aside. Sparks flew as steel met steel. They circled one another, each probing with quick attacks. Halyard had skill. He wasn't just a random bandit. Likely a true Lannister guard once, a trained soldier. Bronn feinted left, drew Halyard's blade out of position, then darted in with a thrust aimed at his ribs. But Halyard was fast. He parried awkwardly, only catching the blade at the last moment. The clang reverberated in the narrow space. Sweat trickled down Bronn's temple. They exchanged another flurry of blows, the stench of old tannery vats filling Bronn's nostrils. He realized Halyard was trying to drive him into a corner. "You think you can serve these foreign invaders?" Halyard spat. "You'll regret it. Cersei was cruel, but she was ours." Bronn snorted, blocking a downward slash. "She was yours? She never gave a damn about any of you. She threatened to have me killed if I didn't murder her brothers. Some loyalty. And a soul." Halyard snarled and pressed harder. Their swords locked in a test of strength. Bronn's arms strained. But Halyard made a crucial mistake. He attempted to knee Bronn in the groin while their blades were locked. A dirty move that only half connected. Bronn twisted, absorbing a glancing blow. Then, with a sharp upward jerk, he freed his sword and raked it across Halyard's arm. Halyard cried out, staggering back. Bronn seized the opening, slamming his pommel into Halyard's jaw. The man reeled, dropping his sword. In an instant, Bronn had the tip of his blade at Halyard's throat. "Done," Bronn panted. "Surrender." Halyard glared, blood trickling from his split lip. "Fine," he spat, sagging to his knees, one hand clutching his wounded arm. Bronn pressed the sword a bit closer. "Don't try anything stupid." Taran arrived behind them, having come around the corridor. He had blood on his sword, eyes flicking from Bronn to Halyard. "Found 2 more. They're done." "Grab this one," Bronn said, stepping back warily. "He's the leader." Taran roughly pulled Halyard's arms behind him, binding his wrists. Halyard hissed in pain but didn't resist. The man's face burned with hatred, but there was nothing he could do. A quick search of the tannery revealed a few more red cloaks, who had either fled or hidden. Varro caught one trying to climb out a broken window. Another apparently escaped through a sewer grate. Still, they'd neutralized the core group, and with Halyard in custody, the Crimson Cloaks would likely dissolve. Bronn and the others dragged the prisoners back to the watch once again, depositing them in cells. Roland took note of Halyard's name with grim satisfaction. "That's one less threat," the captain remarked. "I'll let the Hand know." That evening, Bronn found himself once more in the Red Keep, standing outside Tyrion's temporary quarters in the Tower of the Hand. A pair of unsullied guards recognized him and allowed him inside without question. He climbed the spiral steps, boots echoing. The tower had been repurposed multiple times, once the domain of Ned Stark, then Tyrion, then Tywin Lannister, then Kevan Lannister, and now Tyrion again. The ghosts of old powers seemed to linger in the stones. At the top, an antechamber led to a modest office. Tyrion sat behind a wide table piled high with scrolls, quills, and half-emptied wine cups. A single candle flickered, casting dancing shadows. He looked up as Bronn entered and rubbed his eyes, as if pushing back weariness. "Bronn," Tyrion said, voice thick with fatigue. "I hear you've been busy." Bronn closed the door behind him, crossing the room with a purposeful stride. "We took out a gang of Red Cloak fanatics. Their leader, Halyard, is in custody. That should ease the city's fears for a while." Tyrion nodded. "Good. We'll see that he's tried for his crimes. The Queen is keen on some semblance of justice, though she might be content just to let me handle it." Bronn made a face. "Justice, huh? Wouldn't it be simpler to lop off his head?" Tyrion gave a tired shrug. "Perhaps, but Daenerys believes a public trial might demonstrate that she isn't a tyrant who kills all opposition outright. It's a fine line to walk." Bronn took a seat across from him. "Let's talk about my reward then." Tyrion chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't waste time. Yes, I've spoken with the Queen. She's agreed to grant you lordship over a certain estate in the Reach, near the Mander, where the farmland is still fertile. It belonged to a minor knight who died without heirs. You'll have a keep, no larger than a manor really, and the surrounding lands." "Benderi." Bronn raised an eyebrow, not entirely displeased. "That sounds workable. Not as grand as Highgarden, but maybe less trouble." "Precisely," Tyrion said. "Daenerys still hasn't decided what to do with Highgarden. She might restore it as a seat of the Reach, or reward one of her staunch supporters, or attempt to find a Tyrell cousin. But for you, this manor is significant enough to give you a title and a source of income." "Am I expected to stay there permanently?" Bronn asked, leaning forward. "Because I'm no farmer. If it comes with peasants who know their business, I'll collect the taxes. But I don't plan to muck out any stables." Tyrion sipped from a goblet, grimacing. "The local folk have been running the estate themselves for a while. They'll keep doing so. You just need to appoint a steward, maintain the roads, pay your taxes to the crown, that sort of thing. Or you can hire someone to handle those details while you lounge about in a feather bed." Bronn almost grinned. "That suits me well enough. So, when do I get it in writing?" "Soon," Tyrion promised. "I'm drafting the official documents. The Queen will sign or seal them once she's done dealing with more urgent matters, like the aftermath of the war. Also, she might want you to remain in King's Landing a bit longer, to continue assisting with security. Once the city stabilizes, you'll be free to depart to your new domain." Bronn considered that. "Fair enough. I'll stay as long as it's lucrative. But I'm not about to become some permanent fixture in the Red Keep, wearing fancy clothes and bowing to every lord." Tyrion chuckled. "We wouldn't expect that. Now, let me fill you in on the broader state of affairs." Benwind. He reached for a set of parchments. "Daenerys has been meeting with various lords who came to swear fealty. She's also dealing with the North, which is somewhat discontent about a Targaryen monarchy. But Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, has been speaking on her behalf, bridging the gap. Sansa Stark remains Lady of Winterfell, effectively in charge there. The Vale's young Lord Robert Arryn is too weak to pose any real issue. They're content enough if the realm's stable." Bronn nodded, waiting for more. Tyrion tapped another scroll. "Then there's the matter of Dorne. The new prince or princess, whoever emerges after the Martell's downfall, may not be eager to bow quickly, but they'll likely accept a peace treaty if it benefits them. The Iron Islands remain unsettled. Yara Greyjoy nominally rules there, but she's had to stamp out the last of Euron's supporters. All told, the realm is fractured but not in open rebellion." "Better than it's been in years," Bronn remarked. "Indeed." Tyrion set the parchments aside. "We must also handle the trial of Cersei Lannister. The Queen wants it public, though I suspect many will call for Cersei's head outright. If the crowd is too vehement, it could turn ugly." "Then?" Bronn shrugged. "What's the plan, then? Parade her through the streets? That rarely goes well." Tyrion's eyes flicked down. "We're trying to avoid that. Likely we'll hold it in the throne room, a formal affair with Daenerys presiding, or perhaps a panel of lords. The charges will be read: betrayal of the crown, murder of the sept of Baelor's occupants, unleashing wildfire, etc. She'll have a chance to speak in her own defense." "Now?" Bronn let out a low whistle. "You think she'll just stand there quietly?" Tyrion's lips pressed into a thin line. "I doubt it. But the alternative is executing her without a trial, which Daenerys believes would set a poor precedent. For now, Cersei remains in her tower cell, guarded by Unsullied. Jaime visits her, but we have no illusions she'll confess or repent." Bronn nodded. "Well, let me know if you need a crossbowman in the rafters." Tyrion huffed a short laugh. "I'll keep that in mind. In the meantime, keep your men on the streets. Stamp out any last pockets of violence. We're close to real peace, Bronn, and that's something rare in this damned realm." "And a sea." They parted with that. Bronn decided to spend the evening in the city, checking on his recruits, making sure the watch was calm. He couldn't help but wonder how the trial would go. Part of him felt a twisted pity for Cersei, pregnant and alone, but he remembered her cruelty well enough. She'd never hesitated to cast others aside to protect her own power. A trial would be a spectacle, that was certain. Over the next few days, the city settled further. A sense of normalcy began to return. Markets bustled, taverns reopened. The Red Keep's corridors bustled with petitioners seeking audiences with the Queen or her advisors. Bronn's men continued to chase whispers of leftover Lannister loyalists, but the Crimson Cloaks had been the main threat, and with Halliard locked away, that group dissolved. The day of Cersei's trial arrived without fanfare. Word had spread, though, and a crowd gathered outside the Red Keep, hoping to catch a glimpse of the fallen queen. Daenerys had ordered a strong guard presence to prevent any mob violence. Bronn stationed half his squad in the outer courtyard, scanning for trouble. He himself was inside the throne room, near the side pillars, alongside Terran and Alyssa. The throne room filled with lords, ladies, and curious onlookers. Daenerys Targaryen sat upon the Iron Throne, flanked by unsullied guards. Tyrion stood at her right, hands folded. Grey Worm remained close, his face as impassive as ever. Varys was nowhere to be seen. He died some time ago, undone by his own conspiracies. Sir Davos lingered near the front, as did Jon Snow, face grim. Sansa Stark and Arya Stark had journeyed south as well, presumably to witness the conclusion of the woman who had caused them so much harm. Jaime Lannister stood to one side wearing plain attire, his golden hand glinting in the torchlight. His expression was haunted. A hush fell as a group of unsullied lead Cersei into the hall. She wore a simple gray gown, her once golden hair dark at the roots and cropped short after her walk of shame. Her pregnancy was evident, her belly round beneath the fabric. Yet she carried herself with a fierce dignity, head held high. She was forced to stand in the center of the room, surrounded by unsullied. Daenerys surveyed her with cool poise. Tyrion stepped forward. "Cersei Lannister," he began, voice carrying in the vaulted hall. "You are charged with high treason against the rightful queen, destruction of the great sept of Baelor, the murder of numerous nobles and small folk, violation of the truce against the Night King, and conspiracy to unleash wildfire upon civilians." "How do you—" Cersei's lips curled. She cast a withering look around the hall. Bronn watched from his vantage, noticing how her gaze flicked briefly to Jaime, then to him, then to Daenerys. Finally, she spoke, her voice resonant. "I plead that this entire farce is a travesty. I was born of a noble house, wife to one king, mother to another. I defended this realm against foreign invaders and false claimants." She paused, letting the words echo. "I will not bend the knee. I will not confess to your warped version of history." A ripple of discomfort passed through the crowd. Daenerys remained silent, letting Tyrion continue. "Your own actions are not in dispute," Tyrion said. "We have testimony. The destruction of the Septi, the murder of the High Sparrow and the Tyrells, your refusal to honor your pledge to join the fight against the Night King, your subversion of the peace at the Dragon Pit." "Your so-called peace was a sham," Cersei interrupted. "You brought unsullied and Dothraki hordes across the sea, unleashed dragons upon the realm. I did what I must to protect King's Landing from your queen's fiery madness." Jon Snow stepped forward, his jaw set. "The only madness here is your willingness to let the dead overrun Westeros to maintain your throne. Thousands died because of your betrayal." She spared him a contemptuous glance. "Ah, the northern bastard turned Targaryen puppet. How fares your beloved North, Snow? Or should I call you Aegon? Not that it matters. You all bow to a silver-haired usurper." Daenerys stirred on the throne, a flash of anger in her violet eyes. But she kept her composure. "We are not here to relitigate your life story, Cersei. You have been defeated. The question is your guilt and your sentence." Cersei seemed about to retort, but Tyrion cut in. "There are many witnesses, many who suffered under your rule. I call upon Sir Jaime Lannister to speak." Jaime stepped forward reluctantly. He looked at Cersei, eyes brimming with sorrow. "Sister," he said quietly, "your crimes are beyond dispute. The day you unleashed wildfire on the Sept, you killed hundreds, if not thousands. You wanted to burn the city rather than surrender." He paused, struggling for words. "I tried to believe there was good in you, but you cared only for your power, not the realm." "Then Saruman." Cersei's lips trembled. "You betrayed me, Jaime. You left me to join our enemies. You would have me stand here humiliated while you play the hero?" Jaime bowed his head. "I am no hero, but I will not defend your actions. There's nothing I can say to excuse what you did." Cersei stared at him for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then she turned away, silent. Tyrion cleared his throat. "Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, come forward." Bronn blinked, exchanging a glance with Terran. Then he stepped away from the pillar, walking down the aisle until he stood near Jaime. He wasn't exactly sure what Tyrion wanted him to say, but he'd speak his mind if needed. Tyrion spoke to the hall. Sir Bronn was once in the employ of House Lannister. He had ample opportunity to see Cersei's methods firsthand. Later, she offered him gold to murder her own brothers. "Sir Bronn, do you confirm this?" Bronn nodded, facing the crowd. His voice carried, though not as polished as the Lord's. "Hey." She gave me Joffrey's old crossbow, and promised me a wagon load of gold if I'd killed Tyrion and Jaime. When I found them, I decided to switch sides. Might been the best decision of my life. Murmurs rippled. Cersei let out a bitter laugh. "You're a sellsword. You'd kill anyone for gold, including me." Bronn shrugged. "I've killed many men, and I don't pretend otherwise. But even I have lines I won't cross. Apparently, turning on you seemed a better deal." Daenerys raised a hand, gesturing Bronn to step back. He retreated, meeting Cersei's glare for a final moment. Tyrion resumed. "We have enough testimony to establish Cersei's guilt. If she has any final words in her defense, let her speak them now." Cersei lifted her chin, eyes gleaming with tears she refused to shed. "My final words are that all of you are traitors to the true crown. I will go to my grave knowing I was the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Do what you will." A heavy silence descended. At length, Daenerys stood, the metal of the throne scraping. She descended the steps, her face a mask of ice. "Cersei of House Lannister, you are hereby found guilty of treason, murder, and crimes against the realm. I sentence you to die." A roar of approval broke from some corners of the hall, but Daenerys raised her voice over it. "However, in light of your unborn child, I have been counseled to grant leniency. Some believe we should wait until the child is born to spare it. Others say your crimes are too great." She paused, letting the tension thicken. "I will not stain my reign with the blood of innocents. You will be kept alive in a secure place until you deliver the child. Once the child is safe, your fate will be carried out." "Now." Cersei's mouth twisted in fury, but there was a flash of something else. Relief, perhaps, that her child might not be executed with her. She held Daenerys' gaze and said nothing. Daenerys turned to Grey Worm. "Take her away. She will be confined under heavy guard, with the best care to ensure the child's health. Once the child is born, we will revisit her sentence. And if the child is healthy, it will be placed with a family that will raise it properly. That is my final word." Grey Worm nodded, motioning two Unsullied forward. They gripped Cersei's arms. She took one last look at Jaime, then at the rest of the hall, before allowing herself to be led away. The throne room erupted in a babble of conversation. Some shouted for immediate execution, others praised Daenerys' mercy. Bronn simply exhaled, thinking that at least a measure of justice had been served. He caught Jaime's eye. The man seemed caught between sorrow and relief, no doubt torn by conflicting loyalties, and the knowledge that his once beloved sister was beyond redemption. Daenerys ascended the throne again, looking weary. Tyrion turned and spoke in a formal tone. "The trial is concluded. We thank the lords and ladies who attended. Any further petition or business will be addressed at a later time." People began to disperse, though pockets of chatter lingered. Bronn made his way out, followed by Taryn and Alyssa. Outside, the courtyard teemed with rumors already swirling. Some shouted that the queen was too soft, others that she was too cruel. Bronn found himself ironically amused at how the realm was never satisfied. He joined the watchers stationed at the gate, verifying that no riot had broken out. A tense calm seemed to settle over the city. Perhaps they were too tired for riots. Or perhaps they sensed that dragons could still rain fire if Daenerys willed it. In the following weeks, King's Landing steadied itself further. Daenerys worked with Tyrion and the other advisors to feed the people, restore order, and negotiate with outlying lords. Slowly, the presence of roving sellswords and leftover Lannister men faded. Some integrated into the new city watch, others left for parts unknown. Bronn's role became less dramatic, a handful of petty criminals or rumored conspiracies. Nothing that matched the scale of the Crimson Cloaks. Meanwhile, he kept pressing Tyrion for the official deed to his estate in the Reach. At last, The day came when Tyrion summoned him to the Tower of the Hand once more, a satisfied grin on his face. "Here it is," Tyrion said, presenting a sealed parchment. "Signed by the Queen with her hand as witness. You are now officially Lord of Stonedance Manor." Bronn took the parchment, scanning the fancy script. He wasn't much of a reader, but the gist was clear. The land was his, the taxes were set, and the Queen recognized his title. A smile tugged at his lips. "It's about bloody time." Tyrion chuckled. "You'll want to ride out there eventually. See how the manor stands. It's small but comfortable. Plenty of farmland. The local peasants have been sending what little taxes they can, waiting for someone to claim the seat." Bronn rolled the parchment, tucking it into his belt. "Then I'll go soon. But first, I'll enjoy a few days of rest in the city, maybe get drunk and buy myself a few new sets of clothing befitting a lord." Tyrion smirked. "Try not to blow all your coin before you even arrive. You'll need to hire staff, possibly some guards if you want to keep the roads safe." "Then no wonder," Bronn snorted. "Who says I won't just live alone with a few whores? Less overhead." "It's your domain," Tyrion said, his voice dry. "But do try to leave it better than you found it, We're all hoping for a more prosperous realm." Sure, Bronn said with a dismissive wave, though inwardly he felt a spark of pride. It was a strange sensation, the idea of actually owning a place, having something more permanent than a bag of gold. He coughed. "So, this is it then? You don't need me lurking around King's Landing anymore?" "Ben?" Tyrion hesitated. "We can always use capable men, but the city is calming. The Queen's peace is holding. You've done enough to earn your keep. Unless you'd like to remain in an official capacity, commander of something or other." "Commander of something or other," Bronn echoed with a snort. "That doesn't sound half bad, but I think I'll take the freedom instead. If I'm needed, you know how to find me." Tyrion nodded. "Indeed I do." That evening, Bronn collected his gear from the tavern headquarters, gave a handful of coin to Terran, Vero, and the others who had served well, and told them they could remain in the city watch or move on as they pleased. Terran decided to stay with the Golden Company for now. Alyssa joined the watch officially, seeing a chance at stable pay. Jairus said he might head south as well, hoping to find a quieter life. They parted amicably, with Bronn's final caution to them. "Don't get yourselves killed for nothing." Bronn spent one last night in King's Landing doing the thing he enjoyed most, drinking ale in a half-decent inn, flirting with a barmaid, and pondering how would transform a stuffy old manor into a place truly suited for him. He imagined installing a large wine cellar, perhaps a new courtyard for sword practice, a stable for some fine horses, maybe even a small watchtower to spot trouble before it arrived. And if the local peasants had good farmland, all the better. Taxes would roll in. The next morning, he left the city quietly, mounted on a sturdy roan horse, had purchased with a bit of the coin Tyrion had advanced him. The roads west were filled with travelers, merchants hauling goods, farmers driving carts, the occasional retinue of knights on their way to pledge fealty to Daenerys. The threat of war had receded, leaving behind the normal bustle of a realm trying to stitch itself back together. As he rode, Bronn reflected on how unlikely this outcome was. He'd started as a simple sellsword, fighting for the highest bidder, always ready to switch sides if the price was right. He'd come close to killing the Lannister brothers on Cersei's orders. Instead, he'd turned that crossbow over and helped them broker peace with the Golden Company. In doing so, he had changed the fate of the war, and his own fate. Now, Daenerys Targaryen ruled in King's Landing, with Tyrion as her hand, and the realm stood on the brink of a new era. Cersei, once the most powerful woman in Westeros, languished in a guarded tower, awaiting the birth of her child, and likely her own execution thereafter. The North had bent the knee, albeit reluctantly, and the rest of the realm seemed ready to accept the Dragon Queen. For now. If the future brought new conflicts, Bronn suspected it wouldn't be his concern, so long as he could hold on to his newly gifted seat and keep the gold flowing. He rode for days, following the Mander's gentle bends. Eventually, he found the lands described in his deed. Stonedin's manor was nestled in a pleasant stretch of rolling hills, with a small river branching off from the manor. The manor itself came into view near dusk. A squat, two-story keep surrounded by a low stone wall, a cluster of peasant huts nearby, fields of barley and turnips stretching outward. It was no shining castle like Highgarden, but it wasn't a ruin either. A handful of farmhands gawked at Bronn as he approached the gate. A single guard in old, ill-fitting armor stood at the gatehouse. He looked astonished to see an armed visitor. "Who goes there?" he called, voice cracking. Bronn reined in his horse, lifting his head with mock regality. "Bronn, Lord of Stonedin's Manor." The guard's jaw dropped. "Beg pardon?" Bronn smirked, rummaging in his saddlebag for the sealed parchment. "Here." Signed by Queen Daenerys Targaryen. The land is mine now. "So you work for me, friend." The guard stared at the seal, eyes wide. Then he bowed awkwardly. "My lord, we've been waiting for someone to take ownership. The old knight died in the war. We've been on our own." Bronn clicked his tongue. "Well, I'm here now. Let's see the place, shall we?" He rode in. The courtyard was modest, with a worn well at the center, a stable to one side, and the keep's entrance beyond. A few peasants emerged from the huts, peering at the newcomer with curiosity and a bit of trepidation. Bronn nodded to them, trying to exude an air of casual confidence. Inside, the manor's main hall had wooden beams across the ceiling, a big hearth along one wall, and a dais at the far end for dining or receiving visitors. Dust motes danced in the fading light, and the windows were small, letting in just enough illumination to show that everything needed a good cleaning. But it felt surprisingly sturdy and more than adequate for a man who'd once been content with a bunk in a brothel. A middle-aged woman with a stern face bustled in, wiping her hands on an apron. "Lord Bronn, was it?" she asked uncertainly. "That's me," he said, glancing around. "And who might you be?" She bobbed a quick curtsy. "I'm called Hala. I ran the household for Sir Norbert, the old knight who died. We've tried to keep things in order, but we're short on coin. The fields are still producing, though. Will you be staying?" Bronn took a long moment to answer. He looked at the hearth, imagining a roaring fire on a cold night, a table laden with food, maybe a few jugs of wine. He'd add a comfortable chair or two, perhaps some new furnishings. The place might even become cozy if he put in the effort. "Yes," he finally said. "I'll stay. I've got some coin to improve this manor, hire a few more guards. We'll see it run properly. Might even throw a feast once we're settled." Hala's face softened with relief. "We'd be grateful, my lord." Bronn nodded. "First things first. I'll need a room, some decent food, and a bath. Then tomorrow, we'll talk about the harvest, the taxes, all that nonsense." "Then?" She smiled thinly. "Right away, my lord." He left his horse in the stable with an old groom, who assured him the beast would be well cared for. Then Bronn ascended a narrow stair to the second floor, finding a chamber with a large bed draped in dusty linens. He peeled them back, sneezing at the swirl of dust, and made a mental note to order fresh bedclothes. Still, it was a bed of his own, in a keep that was his own. He set his sword belt aside, gazed out a small window at the fields beyond, tinted gold by the setting sun. A faint sense of astonishment crept over him. He was no longer a rootless sellsword with a single bag of coin. Now he was a landed lord. Small scale, yes, but real. Tyrion had kept his promise. He thought back over the winding path that led him here. The alliance with Tyrion and Jaime, the near betrayal under Cersei's threat, the decision to turn that crossbow over to the imp, the infiltration of the Golden Company, the fall of King's Landing, and the trial of Cersei. So much death, so many twists of fate. And here he stood, in a place he could call his own. Bronn gave a low chuckle. He supposed he'd done more for the realm than he ever intended. Some would call him a hero. Others would call him an opportunist. He didn't care much either way. When Hala appeared to inform him that his bath was drawn, and that she'd prepared a simple stew, he nodded gratefully. He stripped off his travel-worn clothes, eased into the steaming water, and felt his muscles unclench. As he soaked, he wondered about the future. If Daenerys truly kept the peace, if no new wars erupted, he might actually enjoy a quiet life. Relatively quiet, at least. Perhaps he'd invite a few old friends to visit, find a couple of local women or amusements, and settle into the comfortable routine of a minor lord. That notion made him grin wryly. He'd never pictured himself as the settling sort. Then again, he'd never pictured half the madness that had come to pass. Life had a way of surprising him, and he had a knack for surviving it. Later, he dried off, dressed in a fresh tunic that Hala found somewhere, and settled in the main hall to eat stew by the hearth. It was a bit bland, but filling. He sipped a mug of ale, listening to the crackle of fire. Outside, the crickets chirped, and the breeze rustled the fields. In that gentle hush, Bronn felt something he couldn't quite name at first: contentment. It was a rare emotion for a man who'd spent his life chasing coin and ducking swords. Yet here he was, alive, with more security than he ever dreamed possible. A quiet chuckle escaped him. He raised the mug in a silent toast to no one in particular. "Here's to betraying Cersei," he murmured. "Best damn decision I ever made." Then he drank, letting the warmth of the fire and the simple pleasure of a roof over his head envelop him. For now, the realm seemed at peace, and Bronn intended to enjoy every last moment of it. If trouble came calling again, he'd be ready. But, until then, he was content to live like a proper lord, at least once in his life. And, deep down, a small part of him savored the idea that he'd helped spare King's Landing from a fiery doom. He'd never admit it to anyone, but it felt oddly good to have done something worth remembering. He slept soundly that night. In the morning, he began the next chapter of his life, rebuilding Stonedance Manor, collecting taxes, employing servants, and occasionally hosting guests who came to see the new lord. Word traveled slowly, but travelers would eventually learn that Sir Bronn of the Blackwater had become Lord Bronn, rewarded by the Dragon Queen for his role in saving the realm from yet another devastating war. And so his tale continued. He had gold, land, and a future free from the endless swirl of courtly betrayals, unless he chose to ride back into it. If Daenerys or Tyrion ever needed him again, they knew where to find him. But for the first time in his life, Bronn felt that he might actually have the upper hand, no longer at the mercy of whichever highborn fool held his purse strings. His story would no doubt become embellished in tavern songs, painting him as a cunning rogue who switched sides at just the right moment to save the city. They'd sing of how he once nearly shot a dragon, how he fought whites alongside Jaime Lannister, how he outwitted the wicked Queen Cersei and won a castle. Perhaps the bards would even weave romance into it, or some moral lesson about fate. Bronn didn't give a damn about any of that. All he cared about was that he was alive, wealthy, and comfortable. Enough to enjoy the simple moments, like sipping ale by a warm hearth, walking his lands at dawn, or riding into the nearest village for a bit of fun and coin. He might be a lord now, but in his heart, he was still the same Bronn. Only difference was, he'd gambled big and won. On some evenings, though, when the moon was high and the manor quiet, he'd find himself thinking of the day he handed that crossbow to Tyrion, the day he turned his back on Cersei's gold in favor of a bigger, riskier bet. He'd recall the look on Tyrion's face, relief, gratitude, and a flicker of something like respect. Maybe that was the closest he'd ever get to true friendship with a highborn. It hadn't been sentiment that guided Bronn, not entirely, but in retrospect, he wondered if that small glimmer of loyalty was what set him apart from the scum who'd do anything, kill anyone, for coin. He'd snort at the thought, reminding himself that he was no shining knight. Yet a faint smile would remain on his lips as he fell asleep, content in the knowledge that for once, he'd picked the right side at the right time, and in doing so, he had saved not just himself, but a great many others. That was the real twist in his tale. A sellsword who inadvertently became the realm's savior, at least in a small but crucial way. Bronn would tell you it was all luck and cunning. Others might say the gods had a hand in it. Whatever the truth, it led him here, to a good bed, a loyal staff, and enough gold to last a lifetime. So he would lie there in the darkness, thinking of coin jingling in a chest beneath the keep, of the farmland that would soon fill his coffers every harvest, of a future unbound by old oaths or cheap sellsword deals. And he'd feel something close to happiness. Yes, it was worth it. Worth betraying Cersei, worth braving the North, worth risking that crossbow. Because now he was free, in every sense that mattered, and if that wasn't a victory, he didn't know what was.